Chapter 2681. An exaggerated plot of absurdity. The creator of the universe even gave her a name, Shijio. She had the meaning of being highly valued. As for Jio, it meant long-lasting. Jio was also how the number 9 was pronounced in Chinese. The imperial number was also the highest numerical number before the perfect 10, so it was the closest number to perfection. He named her so because he intended to cherish her for an eternity. Her name was also a sign that she would one day become the imperial and domineering master of the universe. On the screen, Shijio seemed to be highly fond of her name. She expressed great enthusiasm toward him and asked for his name. The creator of the universe thought about it for a moment before uttering his name, Fan Chencher. The name sounded very elegant and graceful. Only a cultural man would name himself that way. Shijio naturally held the man in high regard. One day, the woman on the screen made a bold confession to the creator of the universe. "Dear Godfather, I adore you. May we become husband and wife like the mortals?" Gu Shijio was still thinking about the name, Fan Chencher. The name reminded her of someone she knew, but for the life of her, she could not remember where or when she last heard it. By this time, the creator of the universe finally had a face of his own. If he could create everything in the universe, he could easily create a perfect body with a perfect face for himself. It was flawless from head to toe. However, the more Gu Shijio looked at him, the more she failed to resonate with his perfection. Something was not quite right about the man. Normally, she would be drawn to men with perfect qualities. Even if she were not emotionally attached to him, she would still find a man's perfect appearance to be pleasant to her eyes. On quite the contrary, the perfect-looking man on the screen only looked like a rubber mannequin to her. The sight filled her with disgust. No matter how perfect a rubber mannequin looked, she could not possibly fall head over heels. However, to her surprise, the lady in the video appeared to view Fan Chencher with the most affectionate sight. Gu Shijio felt her flesh crawl as she saw the scene. She was especially uncomfortable when she heard Zijia's loving confession for Fan Chencher. Would she fall for the man? It was safe to assume that if she really adored Fan Chencher in her previous life, the depth of her love for him would surely be passed on to her next life. Meeting him would surely strike a chord in her heart. Just like her first encounter with little Nianma in the upper bound, she clearly did not remember anything about him, but she still wanted to get close with him and protect him from all harm. She did not even mind flirting with him, even though he was a kid. In the end, she found herself to be in love with a boy who was so much younger than herself. Looking at Fan Chencher, Gu Shijio was sure that she felt nothing for him. There were no waves of emotion, nor a single bit of admiration. She decided to sit down on the chair to watch the remaining contents of the video. After the woman confessed her feelings and intentions to the creator of the universe, Fan Chencher only responded to her confession with a pleasing smile. He rubbed the tip of her nose softly and said, "Silly girl, why should we be tied to tradition? Is there any difference between the married and us? Don't worry. You are my best creation thus far. I will surely grant you a perfect partner." There was a glimpse of disappointment in Zijia's eyes, but she soon forgot about it and continued her exploration of the universe with Fan Chencher. Once every century, Fan Chencher would invite Fuyi for a game of chess using the stars. Every time he did, he would take little Shijio along. When the game was ongoing, little Shijio would stay by their side and watch them. Sometimes, she would play the role of a servant and serve them water while observing their moves. At first, she knew absolutely nothing about the game and was only a quiet spectator. When it was over, she would often ask Fan Chencher to play the game of chess with her. Hence, her skills developed over time. The next time that Fan Chencher and Fuyi met for chess, she slowly had a grasp of their moves. Sometimes she would play against Fuyi as well. Chapter 2682. An exaggerated plot of absurdity. Fuyi did not pay much attention to her at first. She was merely a stranger who was irrelevant to him. Her talent, however, managed to impress him, so he did not mind having her as an opponent for a game or two. Over time, Fuyi grew fond of her. When he went fishing in the Milky Way, he would very often catch certain fishes that possessed an immense source of spiritual power and also tasted good. He would reserve his good catches specifically for Gu Shijio. The two men never needed any food, so Gu Shijio would finish most of the fish on her own. Day after day, her spiritual power gradually increased. As the video progressed, Gu Shijio realized that everything in the universe was still in perfect harmony. The main difference was that Fuyi seemed to fancy Shijio, the girl whom he called as his young, little apprentice. They no longer only played chess together. Instead, they would often travel from galaxy to galaxy together. Those were happy days for both of them. Soon, Fuyi started looking at Shijio differently. In return, Shijio seemed to be quite attached to Fuyi as well, whom she called her big brother in purple robes. However, Zijia's heart still belonged to Fan Qianshi. She would propose to him every few centuries, but Fan Qianshi was never in a hurry to tie the knot. As time went by, Shijio grew to have a slight feeling of resentment towards Fan Qianshi, so she started spending more time with Fuyi instead. Slowly, Fuyi realized that he had indeed fallen in love with the little girl. However, what Shijio had for Fuyi was merely the bond between a brother and a sister. She never took him as a lover. One day, Fuyi finally proposed to Shijio. He wanted her by his side, always and forever. Shijio finally realized how Fuyi felt about her, but she clearly knew that the man she loved was Fan Qianshi, so she turned away from his proposal. Fuyi was never worried about rejection. Therefore, the two of them still traveled around and explored places together. He would take her to different wine tastings in the mortal world, or share some heavenly wine with her that he had personally fermented. Feeling comfortable with the man, Shijio never had her guard up with him. One time, she got drunk while consuming heavenly wine and found herself high with euphoria. That night, they finally broke the barrier and had sex with each other. It was already too late for her by the time her sobriety returned. Without a choice, she had to agree to Fuyi's proposal. They went to meet Fan Qianshi and asked if he could marry them in the ceremony. The news struck Fan Qianshi like a sudden bolt of lightning. He could not find a word to express his astonishment by what had happened. In the end, he helplessly agreed to preside over their wedding ceremony. Nonetheless, Fan Qianshi still felt the need to talk to Fuyi in private. He told Fuyi about his responsibility as the master of heavenly law. As the man who governed the rise or fall of the universe, he should never have any inclination or prejudice against anyone. Emotions should be avoided at all costs, or else it would be difficult for him to be fair and objective with all his decisions. Should he get distracted by love, all 6 worlds would be in chaos. In other words, the master of heavenly law should never be in love. He should refrain from having any emotions. However, Fuyi was allowed to marry Shijio under one condition, which was to resign from his position as the master of heavenly law. Fuyi, however, never believed a word that he was told. He made the heavenly laws, so there should not be any violation even if he insisted on getting married. In fact, he treated Fan Qianshi's word of advice with contempt. As the master of heavenly law, he proceeded with the wedding without the man's blessing. The heavenly law had come into existence for many years, so it had become the principle that paved the way for everything to flourish in the universe. It was the laws that should be obeyed by all. Not even the master of heavenly law had the power to escape it. True enough, as soon as Fuyi and Shijio were married, all worlds started falling apart. Natural or man-made calamities haunted many places. Most lands were disintegrated and torn by dissension. The 6 worlds were in a state of complete disorder. Eventually, Fuyi chose to believe in Fan Qianshi's warning. There were only 2 solutions. The first option was to break up with Shijio, so his power as the master of heavenly law would be restored. And the second option was to surrender his power as the master of heavenly law and let Fan Qianshi assume the role. Chapter 2683, An Exaggerated Plot of Absurdity, 3. Fuyi took some time to consider his options and decided not to surrender his power. He stayed away from Shijio and started abusing her emotionally. Although Shijio never loved the man, she was troubled and distressed by the abuse. Nonetheless, she was too embarrassed to ask Fan Qianshi's help. Hence, she chose to endure the pain on her own. To replace her, Fuyi ascended a few celestial beings and brought them into the divine kingdom. He even kept these women as his concubines for pleasure. They were all young and lively, but more importantly, they treated Fuyi well. Fuyi treated them with equal kindness but still chose to mistreat Shijio. He made up many excuses to dismiss Shijio from her position as the empress. Eventually, she became a concubine and was bullied by the other concubines. Shijio always held herself aloof from the world, but the long-term torment changed her. She used to dress in white to appear elegant and refined. However, her change of character had affected her style. Eventually, she became more inclined to dress in black. In a way, the continuous abuse slowly killed her spirit and made her look dark and haggard. The master of heavenly law was allowed to have multiple wives, as long as no emotions were involved. As he managed to rid his feelings for Shijio, soon, peace slowly returned to all 6 worlds. Fuyi was finally happy that things had returned to normal. He was pleased with the changes he made and the results he obtained. He clearly indulged in his life of many wives. Sometimes, he would go to see Shijio and even stay the night. Being bitterly disappointed in him, Shijio would resist him every time he visited. Soon, their difficult relationship became deadlocked. When Fan Qianshi visited them, he finally saw how depressed Shijio had become. Utterly offended, he could not stand the sight of the woman he treasured being abused by another man. He had to talk to Fuyi about it. The talk did not go well, and the 2 men ended up in a big fight, which caused a state of chaos and darkness over a period of time. When 2 gods fought, their strength was enough to destroy the whole world. Fuyi's concubines were among the victims of the clash. Neither side gained from the fight, but Fan Qianshi suffered a little less. He seized the chance and took Shijio away and brought her back to his divine palace. When Shijio got back to his home, she finally understood that Fan Qianshi only turned down her proposal because he was preparing a surprise for her. He was busy preparing their bridal chamber, but a strange combination of circumstances had led her to Fuyi instead. Shijio was filled with remorse and sadness. Soon she became ill. Fan Qianshi never left her side and took good care of her. In the end, he told her to break up with Fuyi if he refused to treasure her as his wife. Fan Qianshi also promised to marry her and that he would not mind her past marriage. He fell in love with who she was, not her body. Shijio entertained the idea and finally decided to talk with Fuyi about their divorce. Never had she thought that she was putting herself in a perilous position. Fuyi did not want to let go of his power, nor did he want to see her getting married to another man. Therefore, he resorted to a third option. First, he showed her around in the galaxy. They then traveled to the mortal world, and he took her to see all of her favorite places. Shijio honestly thought that it was their farewell, which was why she agreed to go in the first place. Finally, they went to their last spot on the itinerary. They visited a lake, the place where their relationship started. It was the place where they first went boating. He took her to the blue boat again and slowly sailed on the lake with her. He even asked if she had any wishes that he could fulfill for her. Shijio told him that her only wish was to break up with him so that she could return to Fan Qianshi. With a smile, Fuyi opened his arms as he replied, "All right, I shall grant you your wish. Let's hug for the last time as a farewell." Chapter 2684, An Exaggerated Plot of Absurdity. 4. Shijio thought about it and decided to hug him. Little did she know that those were the last moments of her life. Fuyi drew out a blue knife and put it straight through her heart. The knife was no ordinary weapon. It was a magical item that belonged solely to the master of heavenly law. A normal celestial being would easily die from just a small cut. Although Shijio was semi-divine being, her body was not made to survive the attack. Moreover, the knife hit her right in her vitality point. She immediately fell into his arm as she had barely any strength left to stand or push him away. Fuyi took her in one arm with gentleness and whispered into her ear, "Shijio, I will never let you marry someone else. You belong to me. If we cannot be together until the very end, I will have to destroy you. Even in your next life, I will not let you go. I will pursue you until you choose to commit yourself irredeemably to me." He gently conveyed his cruel and unrelenting message. Then, he twisted the knife around to shatter the heart of the woman in his arms completely. Shijio finally closed her eyes with dawning recognition of her final moment. "I will never love you, not now, not ever." That was her last message. In conclusion, the video was a dramatic story of love and death. The plot was carefully arranged with a good sense of rhythm and interesting contrasts of characters. Furthermore, the final death scene was the thrilling climax of the entire sequence. Gu Shijio got to see every expression of the characters throughout the video as everything was sharp and clear. Even the water droplets on the grass were clearly displayed. The last scene was clearly very frustrating to her. Gu Shijio clenched her fists to suppress the urge of trashing the entire screen because she had to keep watching. The scene rolled on, and Fuyi was then seen disposing of her body into a lake as soon as he killed her. There lived some fearsome and yet attractive predators in the lake that preyed on human flesh. Shijio loved eating the piranhas. It was a complete life cycle that she ended being eaten by piranhas at the end of her life. After consuming her spiritual body, the piranhas managed to transform themselves into humans. Fuyi looked at these piranhas and sighed. She must be alone on the dwelling path to death. You should all accompany her. He waved his sleeves and sent a flash of 7 colored rays to cover all of the piranhas in a bubble. When the light faded, the monsters disappeared as well. When all was said and done, Fuyi finally went to meet Fan Qianshi, who had been desperately looking for him. Fan Qianshi asked for Zygius' whereabouts, but Fuyi smilingly answered him with another question. "You have only created her to lure me with her beauty, haven't you?" Fan Qianshi hesitated before admitting, "Only in the beginning. I have surrendered my heart to her now. She should not become a tool in our fight. Let her go. I shall live with her in seclusion and keep her away from any sort of fuss. You are still going to be the master of heavenly law. I am willing to give up the fight for her. Where is she now? Let her go." "Dead?" Fuyi softly said. "What?" Fan Qianshi's eyes became instantly tinged with blood. "Don't you think I am aware that she was the root of all our troubles? The root of all troubles must not be kept. She needed to go. Fan Qianshi, she and I were once in love. She was once mine, so her heart and her body will forever be mine, not anyone else's. You will never be with her, even though you used to be the one she loved," Fuyi cruelly said. Chapter 2685. I almost fell asleep. Fan Qianshi started trembling. He quickly made some checks and realized that the man had indeed killed Shijio. He was insanely angered and quickly got into another fight with Fuyi. The fight ended with Fan Qianshi's defeat. Severely injured, he struggled his way back to the Divine Palace. From there, he started meditating in an attempt to collect Zygius' broken souls. The piranhas completely consumed Zygius' body. Even her soul was shattered into tiny bits. Unfortunately, Fan Qianshi was unable to collect all the pieces of her soul. He looked at the scattered bits that he managed to collect and said, "Shijio, I will be sure to bring you back to life, even if it costs me all of my power." He stood up and disappeared along with her remaining soul fragments that he found. The display then showed a different era, where Long Fan first made his appearance. He was the mad scientist who committed his life to make clones. Scientific experiments were his obsessions, though not all his clones were successful. It was only on the rare occasions that a clone was well made, like Long Shi, who was later known as Long Sai. One day, Long Fan was able to create a tiny fetus in his laboratory. He then transferred the fetus into the body of Mrs. Yi through the use of black magic. That was how Yi Hongfeng came to life. Long Fan ran some readings on Yi Hongfeng's body and was quite satisfied with his creation. "Shijio, I will make you a perfect body," he murmured. Soon, he became determined to spend more time in his laboratory to fulfill his objective. It did not take long before another cloned baby started growing in the ice coffin. When the body was ready, Long Fan carefully placed Zygius' remaining souls into the body of the clone. Soon, the baby slowly came alive. Long Fan looked at the baby who had just woken up and said smilingly, "Shijio, welcome back. Shijio, welcome back." A magnetic voice could be heard in the background as a man slowly appeared on the screen. His robes were as black as the night sky, embellished with starry patterns that glistened charmingly under the lights. He let his long, silky hair down, but that did not take the attention away from his beautifully crafted face. He looked flawless. He slowly walked out from the screen and landed gracefully in front of Gu Shijio. He was Fan Qianshi, the creator of the universe. Gu Shijio sat looking at him, expressionless. So, you are the tricky one behind all of this. Tricky? No, all I ever wanted was for you to come back alive. Fan Qianshi looked at her intensely. He took 2 steps forward and stopped about a meter away from her. What are your thoughts after watching the video? Inexcusably lousy acting and a mediocre script. Any hardworking writer can easily produce a better piece. I almost fell asleep, Gu Shijio teased. She could not care less about the story. Don't you believe it? He did not look guilty. Instead, he looked at her with a sense of sympathy and asked, "Are you too afraid to believe it?" Gu Shijio gave him a tight smile. "I do not care what you think." She couldn't believe in a story with so many flaws. Did he think of her as a fool? Fuyi would never do such things. If he had chosen power over her, why would he give his everything just to protect her? He even chose to have his existence wiped away in order for her to fulfill her destiny. All the stories about his ungratefulness and lack of feelings must be made up. Chapter 2686. The Fallacies and Absurdities. Although Gu Shijio was confident that the parts about Fuyi were absurd, she also suspected that the rest of the video clip could have been designed to fool her. Nonetheless, there were a few key points that deserved her attention. Fuyi was the master of heavenly law, and Fan Qianshi was indeed the creator of the universe, so the story about the savage feud between these two must be true. As for the origin of Fuyi, Gu Shijio somewhat believed that the truth was not that simple. She found the explanation unreliable, though she did not have any evidence to support her point of view at that moment. What was of greater urgency was the emergence of Fan Qianshi from the screen. It seemed like Long Fan, the mad scientist, was one of his many identities. The sight of the man hit her in panic, but she remained calm and composed on the surface. As the creator of the universe, the level of Fan Qianshi's kung fu must be unfathomable. Even as a great deity, she was not confident that she could defeat him. Furthermore, she was trapped in an enclosure that was possibly designed specifically to confine her. There must be something that he wanted from her, and without an airtight plan, there was no way she could escape on her own. Fan Qianshi took another step closer to her, but she refused to be intimidated. She held her ground and asked, "Were you the one that led the people of Blue Fox Planet here? Why would you want to do so? Simply to destroy the place?" Fan Qianshi answered with a scornful smile, "Why can't I? I do not appreciate the lives of the people on this continent. The reshuffling is necessary for the survival of the fittest. These filthy human species should not be occupying such a wealthy land. You do not sound like a creator of lives. In fact, you seem more like a demon." Fan Qianshi took a look at his pinkish fingers. There was a huge ring on his middle finger that took the shape of a half-closed eye, which was quite a terrifying sight. "I have created everything in this world, so I get to decide if they should stay or go. By taking away the undeserving, I am actually making space for the good ones to develop. Shijio, you are too soft-hearted." "Really? If you are really that powerful, why didn't you act as soon as you realized that the people here have become unfavorable to you? Furthermore, do you not even have the courage to face me in a fair fight? Is this what the creator of the universe should do? Don't you think this is too dishonorable for a man like you?" Fan Qianshi sat down across the table and poured her a drink. "Try this wine." Gu Shijio obviously noticed the overwhelming fragrance of tea in the air, so she looked at him in contempt and said, "Are you sure that your nose is all right? This clearly is a cup of tea." Fan Qianshi disarmed her with a smile. "It can be a cup of tea or a cup of wine. Those are just ways of naming it. What if they chose to name it as a cup of wine instead of tea? Rules are man-made, and so are the names given to everything. So, why can't I name it the way I want to?" The idea sounded rather complicated, but Gu Shijio was smart enough to grasp it. Are you trying to say that if mankind has decided all that is right or wrong, then these rules and definitions should be abolished as well? Smart. Impressed, Fan Qianshi clasped his hands in admiration of her wits. These rules and regulations are from the heavenly law, which is a set of laws that Di Fuyi has developed over time. Why should I behave within the frame that he has set? I have my own ways of dealing with people and things. He tried to make his morally distorted behavior sound legitimate. Gu Shijio answered in all frankness, in that case, I am actually glad that you are not the master of heavenly law. Otherwise, the world would be in chaos. Chapter 2687. She never knew that she was pieced together. Fan Qianshi was slightly taken aback by her remark. Shijio, you have been brainwashed by this version of the heavenly law. I really regret everything that has happened. What do you regret? I should not have let you live your life in a commonplace. I should never have let you spend so much time with Di Fuyi. I should have taken you away the moment you were created. Fan Qianshi sighed. Gu Shijio slowly swirled the cup in her hand as she listened. You could not take me with you, even if you wanted to. After a slight pause, he continued, Shijio, you have always been very bright. However, you are mistaken this time. I could have easily taken you away, but I was not allowed to. When Di Fuyi murdered you, I only managed to collect 2 pieces of your fragmented soul. The rest of your soul was scattered in every possible corner of the world. In order for you to come back as a whole, I needed to collect all the pieces of your soul. I knew that it was going to be a long and difficult process. Yi Hongfeng possessed a piece of your soul. Gu Shijio, the daughter of General Gu from Starry Crescent Land, had a piece of you. As for the rest, I already collected them all from many different places. These broken pieces had to be regrouped and placed in a clone body. As Long Fan, I strive to transfer all the pieces of your soul into one body so that you could finally be revived as a whole. Gu Shijio did not know how to react to that. She never knew that she was pieced together in that way. If that were true, perhaps there was nothing that this man could not achieve, if he were willing to take the risk. While she tried to find a way to escape, she continued to distract him by pointing out the fallacies in his false story. You are only trying to find excuses for all the wrongdoings that you have committed over the years. Stop glorifying yourself. This part of your acting is totally pointless. You did not wait this long to destroy the Starry Crescent Land because you were merciful. The truth is, you could not find a way to make the invasion happen. Di Fuyi had been here long enough to keep out the people of Blue Fox Planet or the Silver Fox Planet. However, you want to call that damn planet. My return from the upper bound was delayed for 2 years, which opened up a window for you to get through the wizardry barrier, thus making the land vulnerable to an alien invasion. Am I right? Fan Qianshi was a little surprised by her analysis. Shijio, you really are the brightest, he could not help but compliment her. In a way, he also confessed his sins indirectly. Gu Shijio looked at him in disbelief, for his confession had come too soon. Perhaps there were more secrets that she had yet to uncover. Were you the one who brought the Blue Fox family here many years ago? She suddenly asked. Fan Qianshi only gave her a smile in reply. He let her make her own guess. The hypocrite would not give out any significant information to her, so she had to find her own clues. Gu Shijio had once studied about the existence of the Blue Fox family. Their origin dated back 13,000 years ago. As far as she knew, Di Fuyi had been around about 10,200 years ago. The Blue Fox family was more primitive than him, in terms of their time spent in the Starry Crescent Land. They were here about 3,000 years ahead of Di Fuyi. They must have come with advanced technology, but never properly utilized any of it. Hence, there must be a reason why they chose to blend in and cultivate with the locals. The Blue Fox family seemed like a tool that Fan Qianshi had placed in the continent for future use. Chapter 2688. Where are you taking me? It seemed as if the Blue Fox family were Fan Qianshi's pawns on this continent. But he really put everything in place for this day? Was it his goal all along to invite the people from the Blue Fox planet to the Starry Crescent Land? More worryingly, Fan Qianshi seemed to have placed a specific target on Lan Weihe's back. What was his ultimate purpose in doing so? Lan Weihe had lived peacefully among the people of the Starry Crescent Land. Even though Little Fox was part of the Blue Fox family's royal bloodline, that did not seem to be a good enough reason to get her so heavily involved in Fan Qianshi's plot. If the man's objective was to get back at Fuyi, how could Lan Weihe's involvement achieve that? Did he plan to exploit Fuyi's feelings for Gu Shijio by putting her friend at risk? It could not be so simple, could it? Perhaps Little Fox's involvement was much greater than that. Perhaps there was something hidden from them that could change everything. Why did you put in so much effort to plot against Lan Weihe? Gu Shijio asked nonchalantly. Can you guess? Is it because you had something to benefit from her heritage? Fan Qianshi laughed. Maybe it is because she is your friend. It could also be because she is from the royal bloodline of the Blue Fox family. Perhaps I just could not bear to see her being defiled by someone of such a low class? It was clear to Gu Shijio that his explanations were unreliable. There were undoubtedly other reasons behind Little Fox's involvement. Fan Qianshi could tell immediately that Gu Shijio was not convinced. In an effort to put the conversation to rest, he sat comfortably opposite her and said, Little Shijio, you can slowly ponder over the details. There is no hurry. Anyway, we still have a lot of time together. If you really can't guess it, I will explain it to you later on. A lot of time together? Gu Shijio got up as she did not want to stay here for a minute longer. But how could she leave? Fan Qianshi seemed to be able to read Gu Zijia's mind. He sighed. Shijio, don't even think of leaving. In fact, we have left the Starry Crescent Land. Look, the view of space is so nice. He waved his sleeves, and the thick wall inside the cabin progressively turned transparent. Gu Shijio could see the starry sky outside the cabin. The sky was dark blue, and there seemed to be bright stars in close proximity to the battleship. It was so close that it felt as if they could reach it with a stretch of their hands. The scenery was beautiful. However, Gu Zijia's facial expression changed abruptly. Where are you going to take me? Back to my palace. Shijio, that is where you are going to get married. The place has been ready for a long time. Gu Shijio remained silent. She recalled what she had seen in the video. Fan Qianshi's palace was located far away from heaven and earth. It was not on the celestial devil continent nor the Shura world. It was also not close to the Starry Crescent Land. Is your palace located on the Blue Fox planet? Fan Qianshi shook his finger at her. Of course not. Although life on the Blue Fox star is very decent, it is not good enough for me to consider building my palace there. You will understand when you get there. Gu Shijio took a light breath and then sneered. Do you really need this high-tech spacecraft just to go back to your planet? Fan Qianshi looked at her and shook his head. Of course not. However, I needed to bring Lan Weihe with me, so we still need to use it. Lan Weihe? Was she also on this ship? At that moment, there was a sound coming behind the screen. Shijio. Gu Shijio looked up and saw Lan Weihe slowly come out from the screen and land on the ground. The lady looked sweet and pretty. She was the fake Lan Weihe that stayed with Yenchen for more than a month. Fuyi had just cured Little Fox of the venomous spell that was cast on her. All of a sudden, he heard loud cheering noises coming from the distance, so he subconsciously looked up to check what was going on. He saw an odd dish-shaped ship rising from the Blue Fox clan, breaking through the wizardry barrier of the Blue Fox clan and advancing into the sky. Chapter 2689. The Devil's Fetus. What was that? Although Fuyi was very knowledgeable, he had never seen anything like it before. After all, he had just returned to the Starry Crescent Land and rushed here as soon as he could. He had no idea how drastically things had changed during the time that he was away. He only had a faint feeling that the aura on this continent had changed without having any time to investigate it. As he watched the spaceship fly over him, he subconsciously wanted to attach himself to it. He had always been a curious man and liked to chase after anomalies. For a long time, he had wanted to find something that could pique his interest. This metal, silvery, and shiny object that could fly had certainly triggered his curiosity. Father, Little Fox does not seem to be okay. Can you cure her first? Di Hao hugged Di Fuyi's leg to prevent him from leaving. Di Fuyi looked down at his son, who was looking back at him with a pair of big eyes. His request seemed to be genuine. Di Fuyi was aware that his son was not very kind-hearted. He would certainly not bother about saving two people who he had never met. Therefore, he must have his reasons to keep Di Fuyi here. In the end, Di Fuyi suppressed his curiosity and looked at little Fox to see what else was wrong with her. After a brief analysis, his heart pounded in his chest. He stepped forward and quickly looked at her face to assess the situation better. His eyebrows were furrowed. His intense gaze certainly worried Lan Weihu. Subconsciously, she took a step back and checked. What happened to me? She seemed to realize something was wrong. Celestial Master Zhua. My body seems to have been replaced. She then raised her hand and observed it carefully. This body should not be mine. This body is yours. Lan Weihu opened her eyes widely after that remark. She was aware that there was an impostor around Yan Qin that looked similar to her. Lan Weihu also knew that her appearance had gradually changed. Where was her baby? She could not seem to recollect her memories as Duan Mayan had often controlled her. After pondering for a moment, she said, I have been pregnant for more than 4 months. If this is my body, then my belly should be visible, but it is flat. Lan Weihu offered her hand to Di Fuyi so that he could diagnose her by reading her pulse. After a moment, Di Fuyi let go of her hand and faintly said, You have never been pregnant. Lan Weihu was stunned and blurted out, How come? I have had morning sickness for some time, and the doctor at Tianju Hall had also told me that I was pregnant. Before I was captured, my stomach was already slightly bulged. Di Fuyi continued, That is because you are pregnant with a devil's fetus. Lan Weihu remained silent but was clearly stunned by the revelation. Di Fuyi gave her a brief explanation. This devil fetus is born from a kind of devil magic. It is not a real fetus, but a fetus-like object that is formed by an evil aura. If nothing triggers it, then it will grow in you quietly like a human fetus and get bigger and bigger as time passes. However, once it is triggered, it will gradually integrate into your blood, eroding your spirituality and causing your temperament to get more and more gloomy. You would even thirst for blood. If I am not mistaken, you have been eating living creatures lately by sucking their blood and eating their flesh, right? Chapter 2690, The Devil's Fetus 2, Lan Weihu's face was pale. She nodded slightly in response to Di Fuyi's statement and replied, Yes, you are right. It will slowly change your appearance and eventually you will look like your ancestors. Looking at your appearance, I would suspect that you originated from the noblest bloodline of the Blue Fox family 10,000 years ago. Lan Weihu blurted, I don't want to look like my ancestors. I want to look like my old self. Your appearance will naturally return to normal once you remove the devil fetus from your body. You don't have to worry. Lan Weihu closed her eyes slightly after hearing this reply. She had mixed feelings in her heart about what was happening to her. On the one hand, she had certainly been looking forward to having a baby. However, she accidentally saw the fake Lan Weihu once and noticed that she was pregnant too. She thought that they had swapped bodies, but her baby was still alive and well in her body as well. She did not expect that. She suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked, Celestial Master Zhua, is the fake Lan Weihu also pregnant? Can you ask Yan Qin? Yan Qin was currently executing the orders given to him by Di Fuyi. He meditated silently and was oblivious to the entire conversation. Di Fuyi looked at him and knew at once that he was at a critical stage of his meditation. Therefore, instead of disturbing him, he asked Lan Weihu, What has happened? Tell me the full story. Lan Weihu did not dare to keep any information from Di Fuyi. She told him everything about the invasion of the people from Blue Fox Planet as well as when she was caught. She was able to verbalize the entire story to him, succinctly and concisely. Later, she elaborated on the most recent incident involving Yan Qin. Celestial Master Zhua, while I was drinking with Duan Mayan and the soldiers, I was able to see Yan Qin and the fake Lan Weihu. She really looks the same as how I used to, and her belly seemed to match that of a mother who had been pregnant for a month. Otherwise, Yen Chen would not have been so easily fooled. She sounded a little bitter after her last remark. Fuyi looked down and pinched his fingers together in his sleeve. He pondered for a while before asking, "Is your fetus a switching venomous mother fetus?" Lan Weihu looked at him with a confused face. Apparently, she did not understand his question. Since returning to the starry crescent land, Fuyi's priority was to get rid of the people from the Blue Fox planet. He wanted to return the order to the land as soon as possible. However, if this were really a switching venomous mother fetus, it would be a disaster to the world. His priority would have to be Lan Weihu. If the fetus in Lan Weihu's belly were a mother fetus, its evil characteristics would make her gradually lose her own nature. The fetus was known to make its host violent and murderous. In fact, every evil act they carried out would only feed power to the fetus. When it developed, it would be uncontrollable. The person who was pregnant with the mother fetus would be easily provoked and caught in a state of hysteria all the time. It was likely that she would do things that she would regret for a lifetime. Unfortunately, the pregnant individual will remember everything that they did despite not having control over it. Distraught by the evil things they would have done, the child fetus would continue to strengthen from the misery of its host. Once the child fetus matured, it would automatically evolve into a real devil fetus. This kind of devil fetus was incredibly pure. Because of this, it would be extremely fierce and inclined to kill. Whether someone was a god or a human, once this devil fetus infected her, the person would ultimately lose their memory and control over their body. What was even worse was that the victim might eventually lose their life, and their soul would be sealed into the devil fetus for its nourishment. Fuyi had never seen this type of switching venomous mother fetus before. He was only told about this by his mother a few years ago. Ning Xuema was the great devil and was very knowledgeable with regards to these things. She had subordinates who were masters of venom and familiar with this kind of poison. Chapter 2691, The Devil's Fetus, 3. Fortunately, it required quite exceptional conditions to grow this venom. It needed the mother to have an extraordinary bloodline, and the child had to be specially crafted to be the same as the mother. For Ning Xuemo's subordinate, the master of venoms did not succeed in growing one, but she still remembered his action. While Ning Xuema and Shinjiuli were touring the universe, they had paid a visit to the Blue Fox star, where she and Shinjiuli were attacked by a devil fetus. Fortunately, both of them had great skills. In fact, Ning Xuema did not even need his protection as she was highly capable. Thus, they could stay safe from the danger. Later, they investigated the origin of this kind of devil fetus and finally found that it was successfully cultivated by the royal family on the Blue Fox planet. It was said that they sacrificed a pair of twin daughters to grow it. The twins looked precisely the same and married outsiders from the clan, which led to their inevitable punishment by the royal family. They grew the switching venomous mother fetus on the elder sister and the child fetus on the younger sister. To trigger the evil elements in the elder sister, they did an extremely torturous act to her. The royal family had induced her to kill her most beloved husband so that she would turn insane once she regained control over her body. Having remembered the murderous act, she decided to take her own life by removing her heart. Despite taking her own life, her powers seemed to have shifted to the child fetus in her young sister. In the end, the child fetus became a devil fetus and became a powerful assassin for the Blue Fox royals to deal with any outsiders. Shinjiuli and Ning Xuema were both great deities, so their skills were one of the highest in the world. Yet, they could barely fight against the devil fetus even though they worked together. It proved that the devil fetus was really powerful. Lan Weihu was definitely from the bloodline of the Blue Fox planet. She, too, had married an outsider. She even almost killed Yen Qin. This was scarily similar to what his mother had once told him. A cold sweat suddenly broke out on Fuyi's forehead. If he had come a little later and Lan Weihu had killed Yen Qin, the devil fetus in her body would have been formed. He re-examined Lan Weihu's pulse just to be sure of her current status. The mother fetus was still in her body. However, perhaps because he had purified it, the mother fetus had already shrunk into a small ball, and the grievances that were attached to it had been sucked away. Fortunately, Lan Wei-hu did not kill her beloved by mistake. Quickly, Di Fuyi placed his palm on her belly and said, "I will take out the mother fetus from you. It will be slightly painful, please bear with me." His aura was too strong for Lan Wei-hu to turn him down. She did not dare to say anything and just nodded in reply. Di Fuyi's palm lit up as his hand sat Lan Wei-hu's abdomen. It was now her turn to have a cold sweat break out on her forehead. The pain was excruciating. Fortunately, Lan Wei-hu had suffered a lot these days. Therefore, she was not so easily susceptible to pain. After 15 intense minutes, Di Fuyi finally finished the job. The colorful light from his palm had successfully sucked out a baby that was the size of a thumb from the belly of Lan Wei-hu. To their surprise, this baby had 4 eyes on its face and looked extremely fierce. It struggled and screamed in Di Fuyi's palm. Its 4 eyes seemed to be exuding a cold light, which would make an ordinary person tremble just at a glance. Meanwhile, Lan Wei-hu looked like she just soaked herself in water due to the sweat from her body. When she first saw this baby, she was terribly concerned that Di Fuyi might have misdiagnosed her and removed her own baby. Nonetheless, when she saw the 4 eyes of the baby, she involuntarily stepped back from the scene. When the creature saw Lan Wei-hu, it screamed even more fiercely. It struggled in Di Fuyi's palm and suddenly grew a pair of wings to fly over to her. Chapter 2692, The Devil's Fetus, 4. This underdeveloped fetus screeched shrilly to the point where Yan Chen was awakened from his meditation. He opened his eyes and saw this creature at first glance. Naturally, the man was stunned. What is this? Di Fuyi did not have time to answer him. The colorful light in the palm slowly brightened and twisted the creature. With his level of skill, this effort should be able to crush the creature, but he did not expect it to have the properties of water. It could twist into different shapes according to his spiritual power. Out of the blue, Di Hao tugged at Di Fuyi's sleeve and sheepishly said, "Father, its eyes are too scary. I am scared just looking at it." Di Fuyi looked at the boy somewhat confusedly. Since when was this kid so timid? When he came to his senses, he asked his son, "Should I poke its eyes?" Di Hao shook his head. "I think it's probably afraid of broiled. If you burn it, perhaps it will not be able to open its eyes anymore." Di Fuyi did not ask any further questions. Instantaneously, there were a few hot flames in the colorful light in his palm that baked the 4 eyes of that thing had. The unformed creature finally turned into ashes and disappeared. After getting rid of the fetus, Di Fuyi asked, "Where is the fake Lan Wei-hu?" He had to remove the magic fetus in her belly quickly. Otherwise, he could not even imagine what chaos would strike them. By that time, Yan Chen had more or less caught up with the situation after Lan Wei-hu had briefly explained it to him. He was definitely shocked for a moment. "I was too nervous at the time and left her in the Blue Fox clan. Let me accompany you to go back and look for her." "No, you and Lan Wei-hu need to return to Tianju Hall. I can go by myself." Yan Chen was still severely injured. The man had to go back and rest in order to recuperate, so Di Fuyi did not want to bring him along. Fortunately, Yan Chen also understood his own condition. Even if he went together with Di Fuyi, he could not be of much help, so he agreed with him. However, he suddenly recalled something and quickly said, "Celestial Master Zhua, Shijio is still inside and has not come out yet." Di Fuyi was stunned. "Bastard, why didn't you tell me earlier?" Di Fuyi almost wanted to punch Yan Chen. Consequently, Yan Chen felt wronged by the situation. In fact, Celestial Master Zhua came to rescue him in a hurry and asked him not to talk. He had been meditating silently, so how could he have the chance to say it? Nonetheless, he dared not complain. In as few words as possible, he told Di Fuyi what happened and where he last saw Gu Shijio. When Di Fuyi heard the story, he guessed that Gu Shijio was trying to cause a commotion so that Yan Chen could escape. That was probably the reason that she started up the battleship and created chaos. Seconds later, he recalled the monster ship that just flew away. Thinking about what might have happened made him sick in the stomach. He turned and immediately disappeared without even taking Di Hao with him. The baby boy was left dismayed and sighed. It seemed like his father had left him once again. Fortunately, The muscle and Lu Wu were present, so Di Hao rode on Lu Wu and patted his head. He ordered, "Let's go. We have to chase after my unreliable father." The big muscle also wanted to follow, but it was turned away by Di Hao. "You need to send these two people back first. Remember, you have to send them back in good condition. We will meet again when we return." Swiftly, the boy flew away on Lu Wu. The big muscle was speechless. It missed its owner very badly and was eager to see her. However, it did not dare to violate the order given to it by the little demon. It reluctantly let Yan Chen and Lan Wei Hu jump into its shell and carried them back to Tianju Hall. Di Fuyi went directly to the Blue Fox clan. The place was undoubtedly in a state of chaos. Chapter 2693, The Devil's Fetus, 5. The soldiers of Blue Fox Planet watched their marshal's spaceship rise into the air. Initially, they thought that he was trying to find the female lord. However, in the end, the battleship had instantly disappeared. This made the soldiers very puzzled as they did not know what their marshal was doing. None of them could contact him either as he did not seem to answer his directed audio spell. While the soldiers were still trying to fathom what was going on, a strong wind blew at them, and a man in purple appeared out of thin air. Although Guan Yening did not know the identity of this man, he was sure that he was an enemy. Finally, he had found somewhere to release his pent-up frustrations. He immediately ordered his subordinates to shoot the man down. As a result, they were all abused by the man in purple. In just 5 minutes, all the guns in their hands had been seized by the purple-robed man and turned into debris right in his palm. Guan Yening was explicitly called out by Di Fuyi. He was pressed on the ground and had no chance to get up. Di Fuyi gave him two choices: either he used the fewest words possible to report the whereabouts of Gu Shijiao, or he would die and turn into chunks of meat. Obviously, Guan Yening sold out his colleague and reported what he knew of Gu Shijiao. "She had used a special method to destroy many of our warships here, but I honestly have no idea where she is hiding. What happened to the ship that just flew away? We don't know. That is the ship that belongs to our marshal. Inexplicably, it suddenly flew away and disappeared. This is something that has never happened before. If you are wondering whether Gu Shijiao took control of the ship, it is very unlikely. No one can go up to the ship except for the marshal, and the operating system in that ship is different from our other warships. If you haven't studied it, you can't operate it. Even if Gu Shijiao entered the cockpit, she would not have been able to drive it away. Nonetheless, we have no idea why our marshal would suddenly run away." Di Fuyi interrupted him. "Can you locate it?" "Yes, we can mark the location between each warship." "Very good." Di Fuyi took him up to a battleship and said, "Bring me to him." Guan Yening was speechless. However, under the intense aura of the man who instructed him, he did not even dare to fart. Just when he was about to start the battleship, the door was suddenly banged behind them. He was shocked and quickly opened the door. "Which bastard?" Stunned, the man could not finish his sentence. A beautiful little doll pushed him away and walked in with a very fierce beast. "Father, we want to go too." The officer was still confused by what was going on and was very curious. He asked, Mister, may I ask who you are?" The skill of this fellow was too terrifying. It was beyond what he could comprehend. When did the Starry Crescent Land have so many top masters? Gu Shijiao had single-handedly already been a headache to them. But now, there was another master here. Guan Yening could not help but feel that his dream of conquering the Starry Crescent Land was getting farther and farther from him. "In the former Lord Huang Tuesday," Di Fuyi calmly replied. "Then," he added, "the price for me to answer you is that you have to chase after that warship. If you don't pay your end of the deal, I will throw you down from the sky." Guan Yening was clearly stunned by the response. He had not expected there to be another lord in this land. If he had known that two great masters were guarding the Starry Crescent Land, he would never want to come in the first place. "Yes, Lord Huang. Don't worry. I am a master at chasing people." Guan Yening immediately began to locate the ship. After a moment, his face turned green. It has already left Starry Crescent Land. In fact, it is now in space. Di Fuyi did not understand the context of what he meant. He only cared about one thing. Can you catch up to them? Of course. Even if it goes to the horizon, I can locate it. Guan Yening was beaming with confidence. Chapter 2694 looked so disinterested in actuality, Guan Yening was also a little curious about what was going on. In fact, he was a bit angry as well. The marshal had always regarded him as a confidant. He told him everything that was going on in the past. Many of their plans were formed together. Things took a turn about 2 months ago when the marshal suddenly fainted out of the blue. When he regained consciousness, he seemed to be a changed man. The most obvious difference was that the marshal was a lot colder to him. He did not talk much with him and always made excuses to leave. Also, he did not really care about his subordinates anymore. Despite losing so many comrades and warships, the man seemed oddly calm. The original marshal was extremely protective of his subordinates. What was even more ridiculous was the fact that he adopted a cat. The cat looked very ordinary, but the marshal treated it like a baby. He patted it so horribly that its tail was always upright. There was once when the cat sleeping in the middle of a pathway and Guan Yening accidentally stepped on the cat's tail. The cat jumped and scratched him with its paw. He subconsciously tossed the cat aside, but the marshal saw his action. As a result, the marshal also flung him to a wall and almost crushed his spine. The cat's life was more valuable than his life. This realization made Guan Yening sad. He simply could not fathom how his comrade's behavior had changed so drastically. It was as if an evil spirit had possessed him. Ever since Lan Weihu had been seized, the marshal had been tormenting her. He tortured the little girl and turned her into a devil, even though he knew that she was a princess on the Blue Fox planet. Was it right to torture a princess this way? Even though they were thieves, these interstellar pirates from the Blue Fox planet had their own principles. Duan Mayan's recent actions were violating their moral creed. In just over 2 months, Guan Yening's team felt separated from the marshal. The fact that he had taken off into space without even notifying him or his men simply amplified the severity of the issue. Therefore, even if Di Fuyi did not force him to travel to space, he would have gone ahead to investigate the matter himself. Guan Yening wanted to know what the marshal was up to. Without being instructed by Di Fuyi, Guan Yening had been steering the ship as fast as he could. It was traveling at its maximum speed. Nonetheless, he could not help but look at Di Fuyi, who sat next to him. This great god was supporting his head with one hand and looked a little lazy. He had closed his eyes and seemed to be resting. Guan Yening felt a little worried. Since this great god was a man of the starry crescent land and had just returned, he must have never seen such high-tech weapons and defenses. Shouldn't he be a little curious? Shouldn't he want to learn how to operate the ship? Why did he look so disinterested? The general had intentionally made his movements more visible to Di Fuyi while operating the warship. He wanted to show a sense of superiority in front of this god based on how complex it was to pilot the spacecraft. Evidently, Di Fuyi did not care at all. This made Guan Yening feel somewhat powerless. It was as if he was trying to flirt with a blind man. "Mr. General, you are good at handling this ship." A tender child's voice praised him to save him some face. Guan Yening looked down at the little guy who sat on Di Fuyi. The little guy's eyes were sparkling, like black grapes. He looked very sincere and innocent, which made people want to do everything for him. Guan Yening's lips curved upward proudly. "Of course. I am the best at piloting these ships. All my brothers are certainly convinced." "Are you better than the marshal?" "I don't want to sound boastful. In terms of operating the spaceship, I am more seasoned than the marshal. However, the marshal has other strengths. In fact, he can operate the spaceship without using his hands." Chapter 2695. How did he change? Like this. Di Hao blinked his eyes, and a chair started moving around Guan Yening. The general was speechless by what he saw. It seemed that the marshal's ability was not that special after all. Di Hao was rather short due to his age, so he asked Lu Wu to squat and pick him up. Lu Wu obliged and turned into the size of a little pony as it walked toward Di Hao. The boy rode on its back so that he could talk to Guan Yening at eye level. What are your marshal's other abilities? Guan Yening was not dense to the point where he could not see through the little boy's intentions. Are you only talking to me to get information about my marshal? Your marshal? Are you sure? If he really treats you as a subordinate, why would he run away and leave you all behind? He is not running away. He must have some business to attend to right now. Why did he not inform you and your team about this business? And why is he not contactable? He must be aware that my father was present, so he opted to run away and left you all here to keep my father busy and buy him some time. I really admire how you can still stand by him and even stay loyal to him for so long. How do you do it? The two of you must have worked together for a long time, right? It must feel very suffering to work with someone like him. Guan Yening's face and neck turned reddish. What do you know about my marshal? For your information, Duan Mayan was not like this before. Really? How was he like in the past? When did he start to change? He used to be the closet brother to everyone. He was willing to do anything for us. We all drank and ate together as a community. However, 2 months ago, he had a sudden fall and fainted. We tried very hard and managed to save his life. However, when he was awake, he had completely changed. It felt like he was possessed by some kind of devil and acted very strangely. When Guan Yening mentioned that last part, there was a raging fire burning in his heart. He punched his fist on the console and was apparently a little angry. How did he change? Tell me the specific things you noticed. A strong magnetic voice was heard. Guan Yening was stunned. He subconsciously turned back and saw that Huang Tu had opened his eyes and was looking at him. Di Fuyi had caught him at a good time when his blood was boiling. For some reason, the general had the urge to tell the man everything that had happened. Naturally, he began to spill the beans. And with that, Di Hao had accomplished his mission. He rode his little pony around the spaceship and returned to Di Fuyi's side. The little boy even climbed onto his lap. Di Fuyi patted his head as a reward. He always thought that the marshal came from the royal family of Blue Fox Planet. He also suspected that the man had used Lan Weihu to cultivate the devil fetus in order to conquer the continent. However, after listening to Guan Yening, he felt that it was far from being so simple. Duan Mayan's soul must have been swapped. When Di Fuyi guessed this, he needed to ask the general some questions. Nonetheless, he was feeling rather lazy, so he controlled Guan Yening's mind with his mental power and forced him to reveal the truth. By using a spell, Di Fuyi could actually read Guan Yening's memories. However, it would consume quite a lot of spiritual power to use it. He had already exhausted a lot of his spiritual power to come back to the Starry Crescent Land. After that, he used more of his power to save Yen Qin and help Lan Weihu. It was wise for him to preserve as much energy as possible. Chapter 2696. How big was the man's game of chess? Fortunately, he did not have to use a lot of spiritual power to extract the information he needed. Meanwhile, Di Hao lay quietly in his arms. His mouth was slightly tilted upward as he was satisfied with the outcome of his endeavor. Also, he wanted to get compensated for the shortcomings of his childhood. It was rare for him to enjoy fatherly love. Besides, he looked like a little boy now, so it did not look strange for him to hug his dad. Many things had changed since his return, so his parents' fate should have been improved as well, right? However, although his intervention had led to twists in the plot, things that were supposed to happen later seemed to have happened in advance. Moreover, things that had never happened before were happening now. For example, his mother was now entangled with the creator of the universe. Luckily, he knew that she was competent, but as it did not happen in the past, it was difficult to tell what would happen in the future. On the marshal's spaceship, Gu Shijio maintained eye contact with the Lan Weihu that had emerged from the screen. She frowned as she knew that the woman in front of her was an imposter. Even if her body was genuine, this was definitely not her soul. Gu Shijio had thought that the Lan Weihu lookalike was with Yen Qin. It definitely caught her by surprise to see the woman here. Lan Weihu smiled lightly. However, her smile was no longer the innocent one that Gu Shijio was familiar with from Lan Weihu. Nonetheless, there was a kind of enchanting charm to it. Gu Shijio, how are you? Gu Shijio narrowed her eyes and asked, Wu Win. Lan Weihu startled a little and laughed. However, it was not a condescending laugh. You are indeed the Lord. I am surprised that you can recognize me so quickly. This woman had once used Gu Zijia's body to help Long Fan trap Di Fuyi. Gu Shijio had only had one conversation with her in the past. In fact, she has never even seen her original appearance before but could recognize her by her uniqueness. Gu Zijia's grip of her fingers tightened in her sleeve. She looked at her disdainfully and spoke, I never expected you to still want to work for him. Long Fan was one of Fan Qianxi's many identities. In the past, Wu Wian used to serve Long Fan, and now she served Fan Qianshi. She was indeed a loyal subordinate. Wu Wian smiled. Of course I would. I only have one master. What about Mo Zhao? Wu Wian shook her head before continuing, he was just a chess piece for my master. Even Mo Zhao was Fan Qianxi's pawn. How big was the man's game of chess? He used to stay beside Mo Zhao as a subordinate and listen to his every order. He just wanted to synthesize more clones. At that time, he planned everything in the dark and then pushed Mo Zhao out in the front line. He was the mastermind behind everything. He had been planning to conquer the Starry Crescent Land for over 10,000 years, as evidenced by the existence of the Blue Fox family. This was obviously one of his secret strategies while playing chess with Di Fuyi. He wanted to harm Di Fuyi when he experienced life in the Shura world. Although Di Fuyi was physically strong enough to defend against him, he had not restored his memory as the master of heavenly law. Therefore, it would have been easy for Fan Qianshi to kill Di Fuyi at the time. Why did he go one big round just to capture Di Fuyi? What was his real intention? Gu Shijio bit her lips at her thoughts. She did not have enough information to make an inference, so she could only guess that Fan Qian did all this to deal with Di Fuyi. She could not think of any other intention. Then, she looked at Wu Wian again. Her stomach was slightly bloated. Chapter 2697. Everyone is unique. It would appear that Wu Wian had swapped bodies with Lan Weihu. Given the difficulties that Lan Weihu had to go through to get pregnant, Gu Shijio did not want her body to get damaged. She had to do her best to drive Wu Wian's soul out so that little fox could return to this body. She secretly clenched her fists in her sleeves as she was frustrated that she had not learned how to switch people's souls and bodies. Therefore, she had to wait for Di Fuyi to arrive. She had thought of 1,000 other ideas in her mind of the best way to get Wu Wian out of Lan Weihu's body. Despite spending a significant amount of time pondering, she secretly shook her head in dismay. Gu Shijio had other problems to deal with now since she was in Fan Qianxi's spaceship and did not have her teleportation ability here. Furthermore, they had left the Starry Crescent Land and came to space. Even if she could teleport out of the vessel, she would not be able to return to the Starry Crescent Land with Lan Weihu's body. In fact, because of her advanced spiritual power, she would be able to survive the journey back to the lower bound. However, she could not say the same for Lan Weihu. The imposter would probably perish due to the lack of air. Gu Shijio certainly did not mind if Wu Wen was killed in the process, but there was a baby in her stomach. Hence, she could not make any rash moves. Fan Qianshi gave her a rather complicated look. After a moment he smiled. Shijio, although she is not the real Lan Weihu, she is using her body. You can still be friends with her. Wyan's temperament is quite good. I think you will get along well with her. After he finished this sentence, he turned around and disappeared. He must have gone to another cabin to maneuver the ship. In the end, only Wu Wian and Gu Shijio were left in the cabin. Wu Wian smiled and looked at Gu Shijio innocently. Shijio, if you are more comfortable with Little Fox and want her to be by your side, I can imitate her personality and quirks. Upon uttering those words, her physical appearance turned pure and innocent. It was precisely the same as Little Fox's persona. Gu Shijio faintly replied, "Don't you feel tired always trying to imitate others? Where did you leave yourself?" Wu Wian was stunned by Gu Zijia's question. What? Everyone is unique and cannot be replaced. Gu Shijio toiled with a cup in her hand as she spoke to Wu Wian. She continued, "It is better for you to be yourself." Wu Wuyen was speechless. Be herself? She had many different identities these years. She was a man, a woman, a kid, a hero, a thief, a soldier, and even a pawn. As long as her master needed her, she would imitate anyone the best that she could. Fan Qianxi's subordinate had spent a lot of time researching other people's personalities. But what was her own genuine personality? She suddenly experienced a moment of grief as she forgot her true self. Gu Shijio stared at her before asking, "You don't even remember what you are like, do you?" Wu Wuyen remained silent. She tightened her lips together and did not talk for a while. Gu Shijio stood up and proceeded to walk in a circle around her. "Even if you do not remember your original appearance, you should remember your own origin, right?" Wu Wuyen sneered. "Don't try to get information from me." Even though Wu Wuyen dismissed Gu Zijia's question, there was an emptiness in her heart at that point in time. Her own origin? Maybe she had lived for too long and carried too many identities. She actually forgot where she came from. She could not even remember when she started to serve Fan Qianshi. It seemed that she had been following for as long as she could remember through his various identities. It seems that you don't even remember your own origins, and you certainly don't remember your parents. Gu Zijiu sounded soft and mellow, but it felt like a hammer hitting Wu Wuyen's heart. Wu Wuyen smirked and proudly replied, "Parents? I have lived for thousands of years. I am not concerned about remembering something irrelevant. I only need to remember my master." Gu Zijia's eyes flashed slightly. No matter how much time had passed, no one would forget their parents. The only reasonable explanation was that she was orphaned since she was a child. Gu Shijio had always found her to be a unique character. Did Fan Qianshi specially create her? Chapter 2698. She was a killer, a chess piece understanding Fan Qianxi's nature. It certainly seemed like something he would do. Gu Shijio looked down slightly and suddenly asked, "What about Long Sai?" It was a very normal question, but Wu Wuyen lost her cool out of the blue. She paused for a second and then sneered again. "What about him? Don't you remember him?" "Why would I remember him?" Wu Wuyen asked. "Oh, since you don't remember, he actually—" Gu Shijio suddenly paused and decided not to continue. She just smiled and closed her eyes slightly. Wu Wuyen glanced at her and pouted her lips, but in the end, she did not add anything. She sat on a chair with her hands supporting her head to one side as if she was taking a nap, but her eyelashes trembled slightly even though her eyes were closed. The woman had lived for 10,000 years. There was nothing that she had not experienced or seen. She was well aware that Gu Shijio was trying to trap her, and she did not want to be fooled. Nonetheless, the serenity of her mind was certainly absent. As far as Wu Wuyen could remember, she always seemed to lack emotions. She had played many characters and been attached to different men throughout her life. Naturally, she had slept with some of them before. She had played the role of a loving partner, but she had never been sincere about it deep down in her heart. She would not hesitate to kill any of her partners if she needed to do so. She was that heartless. It was only when she was with Long Sai that she had some inexplicit feelings that she could not understand. It was the first time she could not bear to kill someone. Of course, this feeling was very ambiguous. She did not think this was love, but Long Sai certainly warmed her cold heart more than any other man. She had received numerous missions since leaving Gu Zijia's body before eventually being tasked to roam the Blue Fox planet as a spy. She had only returned to the Starry Crescent Land recently. After she returned, the Starry Crescent Land had changed significantly. Many people that she once knew were no longer present, including Long Sai. She secretly made inquiries, and most of the people claimed that he had disappeared after experiencing a catastrophe. Some said he went to the upper bound to become an immortal, others said that he had turned into dust after the catastrophe. They could not even find a strand of his hair. There were various stories about him, but none of the statements could not be verified. Hence, Wu Wuyen never knew what happened to the man. After all, she was Fan Qianxi's subordinate. She was a killer, a chess piece. She worshipped him and was willing to be used by him. Fan Qianshi had many assassins at his disposal, but he had abandoned a number of them over the years. Wu Wuyen was the only one that he would bring with him regardless of his identity. He told her that to be his chess piece, she had to be faithful to him, and could not even have her own personal feelings. She obliged, and she did it very well. Even though she developed a strange feeling toward Long Sai, she did not show it. So, she did not expect Gu Shijio would bring him up today. Long Sai's figure appeared in her mind. She had not seen him for more than 200 years and certainly did not expect to remember him so clearly. She definitely wanted to know if he was still alive. However, she could not ask Gu Shijio. In fact, she could not even reveal any concerns for Long Sai. Otherwise, Fan Qianshi would remove all her concerns from existence. She glanced at Gu Shijio at the corner of her eyes and noticed Gu Shijio looked calm and did not have any intention to talk. Chapter 2699. Loyalty. She closed her eyes, and her lips twitched slightly. Her greatest strength was her endurance, and she was not about to let someone manipulate her. The two of them did not speak, so there was silence in the cabin. The only noteworthy activity in the cabin was the small copper incense burner on the corner table that exuded a milky scent. Although Wu Win had been very quiet and had her eyes closed, she was feeling rather agitated. Her hand lightly touched her belly, which was growing day by day. When she returned to the starry crescent land, she was already placed in this body. Her master told her that she had a small life in her belly because the owner of this body was married. What she needed to do was to seduce her husband to have sex with her. Only then would her task be completed. Wu Win still possessed Lan Weihe's memories, and they felt like they were her own. She could feel the love that Lan Weihu and Yan Chen had shared over the years. She truly could not believe that there was such a love in this world, which convinced her that the task would be an easy one. She did not expect Yan Chen to reject her constantly. The moment when Yan Chen ran away with Lan Weihu, she knew she was exposed. Although she did not know where she fell short, it did not matter now since she had failed. She found her master quickly reported everything to him. She thought that Fan Qianshi would give her a very harsh punishment, but instead, he only asked her to follow him to the main ship. He had told her that he would find an opportunity for her to make up for it. Naturally, she wanted to make up for her failure. She was very grateful to be given a second chance. Nonetheless, this time, Fan Qianshi did not assign any complicated tasks to her. He asked her to come out and stay with Gu Shijio to prevent her from causing any trouble. Fortunately, Gu Shijio had been very calm and did not seem to be plotting anything, which made Wu Wian heave a sigh of relief. Now that her master had left, if Gu Shijio really wanted to attack her in this body, she would not be able to fight against her. The other party would probably destroy her. Although she did not cherish this body, she did have a feeling of affection for the baby in her stomach. She had occupied so many bodies in the past, but none of them carried another life in them. She experienced how the baby grew in her belly each day over the past 2 months. She even sensed the fetal movements that a pregnant mother would. This brought a little warmth to her cold heart. If she personally gave birth to the child, would the child be hers? Would he be close to her? When she got on the ship with her master, she was worried that he would order her to kill the baby. Instead, he asked her to treat the baby with care, which was a relief to her. With all these thoughts in mind, she caressed her stomach and raised the corner of her lips. In the past, she only had her master, and she lived like a relentless machine. But now, she had a child with her, one which she was considering to call her own. After all, they had already left the starry crescent land. Yan Chen and Lan Weihu would not be able to chase after them. Although Gu Shijio had not spoken or even looked at her, her mind continued to focus on Wu Wian's actions. Chapter 2700. Loyalty. 2. She watched carefully as Wu Wuyan regularly caressed her belly and put on a smile on her pretty face. It was a warm and motherly smile. Therefore, Gu Shijio understood that this other party genuinely cared about the kid in her stomach. This newly acquired knowledge was beneficial to Gu Shijio. It was good if she cared for the baby as well. That would make her next moves more convenient. Have you ever raised a pet? Gu Shijio suddenly asked an unrelated question. Wu Win was momentarily stunned but answered coldly, "No. I actually raised a few pets before. Each of them has their own personality. They are entertaining, nonetheless. It seemed like Gu Shijio was bored and wanted to have a casual chat with her about pets. Despite the topic of the conversation seeming rather trivial, Wu Wuyan was still on her guard as she was afraid of any unforeseen traps from her enemy. However, over time, she realized that Gu Shijio had only talked about her pets. She introduced all of her pets to her, like the big mussel, Lu Wu, wind caller, clouded leopard, and so on. She did not ramble on about them but was definitely enthusiastic when she described them. All her pets had their own personalities and shortcomings. Therefore, it made their character extremely distinctive. Drawn by the complexity of her pets, Wu Wuyan was progressively attracted to her topic and occasionally contributed to the sharing. There were even times where she did not agree with Gu Zijia's parenting. You have given them too much freedom. It is easy for them to become rebellious and out of control. Gu Shijio chuckled. Why must we control them? Aren't they independent individuals? They should have their own life. I treat them as friends and they treat me the same. They will fight hard for me whenever they were required. I believe there is no need to train them like machines. They are not my accessories. Even though I am their master, I can't control every aspect of their lives. Wu Wuyan remained silent, but her heart seemed to be shaken. She looked down at her hand and was reminded that she was in someone else's body. Although her soul was free to enter any other human body, she would not actually be that person or live that person's life. No matter how well she could imitate them, she was still a substitute. In fact, she could not even remember her original appearance and personality. Everything she did was for her master. Perhaps she was more loyal than a dog. Every pet had its own appearance at the very least. And Gu Zijia's pets even had their own personalities. Nonetheless, her owner had treated her very well. He always brought her along for all his journeys. Presumably, in her master's heart, she was indispensable. She would be his favorite pet at the very least. Loyalty was all that he asked for. She only needed to be faithful to him. If she were well behaved, her master would never abandon her. Thus, there was no need for her to care about her own appearance and personality any further. She closed her eyes and meditated. In another cabin, Fan Qianxi's appeared to be in a gloomy mood as he stared at a black and gold plate. There was a light red worm lying on the plate. The worm looked somewhat lifeless and dehydrated. It looked long gone. The sight of this worm made Fan Qianshi clench his fingers in his sleeve. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. He could tell from the worm that his enemy killed the mother fetus, which he planted in Lan Weiho. That was a massive loss to his plan. It seemed that he had no choice but to go ahead with this backup plan. He heaved a sigh as he sat strangely at a table and put out 7 jars. Then he held out 3 fingers and cast a spell. Gradually, it became visible that there were beads of blood on his other 7 fingers. He placed the blood droplets onto the sealed jars. Chapter 27:01 Loyalty 3. These blood beads fell on the jar and spread around the containers. After a while, the jars trembled slightly as though they were alive, and mist began to rise into the air. The color of the mist that appeared on each jar was different: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, navy blue, and purple. The jar looked rustic and had complicated patterns engraved on them. The designs looked like insects and beasts scattered all around the jars. In the foggy mist, the designs seemed to twist and toil, which made it look like they were coming alive. Meanwhile, the color of the jars gradually changed as well, each getting redder than before. Apparently, there was something in the jar. The beads from Fan Qianxi's fingertips continued to drop onto the jars and evaporate with the mist. As the jars continued to shake vigorously on the table, there was a dull scream coming from the insides as if some evil beasts were held captive inside and could not escape. It sounded like the cries of many grievances that would easily run chills down anyone's spine. The mist gradually grew thicker while the patterns became more vivid. Additionally, a pinkish liquid that looked similar to the ones from peach blossom petals that bloomed in March appeared to ooze out of the jar. It looked delicious. It was clear that the entire process took a lot of energy and effort. Fan Qianshi only collected a few drops of the liquid, but already had sweat all over his forehead. By the time he managed to accumulate a glass of the liquid, he was already drenched in his own sweat. When he was done with everything, the mist hovering above the 7 jars finally dissipated, and the pattern on the jar seemed to become lifeless again. Fan Qianshi smashed the jars all at once. He was relieved that everything was done according to the plan. He waved his sleeves, and the 7 jars turned into dust altogether. He held the precious liquid in his hand with a faint smile on his face. Having some time to relax, he flipped a switch and managed to access CCTV footage of Gu Shijio and Wu Wuyan sitting in the cabin silently. His gaze fell on Wu Wuyan's face, and he sighed softly. Wu Wuyan was the most loyal dog under his command. He really could not bear to sacrifice her, but he then turned his eyes to Gu Zijia's face and stopped for a moment. There was a sense of unwillingness at the bottom of his eyes. He had been working SP hard for so long to get to where he was today. He was really so close to success. He could not let himself lose the upper hand now. With that thought in mind, he left the room. Fan Qianshi emerged from the screen like a ghost again. Gu Shijio did not seem to be surprised to see him this time but was secretly on her guard. On the other hand, Wu Wuyan was relieved to see her master return. Finally, she did not have to worry that Gu Shijio could give her a hard time. What did you both talk about while I was gone? Did you enjoy each other's company? Fan Qianshi smiled as he casually asked. It was good. Miss Gu told me stories about her pets. Wu Wuyan did not hide anything from Fan Qianshi. Fan Qianshi did not have any visible reaction to her statement. However, he answered, her pets are interesting, but they are not very useful. I treat them as friends instead of using them as tools. Why would I care whether they are useful or not? Gu Shijio could not hold her thoughts back. Fan Qianshi shook his head slightly and faintly replied, Shijio, remember that a pet is a pet. We only raise them if they are useful. Since we are responsible for raising them, we need to make sure that they obey us. Only then will they be truly obedient and listen to our orders. It seems that this is your way of training a pet. It is extremely cruel, in my opinion. What if one day they are injured and are no longer useful? Are you going to kill or discard them? Chapter 2702, Loyalty, 4. Fan Qianshi smiled and did not deny it. Of course. If they are useless, why would anyone want to keep them? But what if they have done a lot for you in the past? It is their duty to work for me. It does not offset anything. At most, I will make their death less painful. What about your subordinates? Will you treat them the same? Fan Qianshi laughed. Shijio, are you trying to provoke the relationship I have with Wu Yin? He then turned to Wu Win and asked, Win, are you provoked by her question? Master, rest assured. I am absolutely loyal to you. Fan Qianshi asked again, what would you do if I asked you to kill yourself? I will do so without hesitation. Wu Wuyan's words were loud and clear. Fan Qianshi stretched out his hand to pat her on the shoulder as he said, Win, I have always known that you are the best subordinate that I have had. I am very grateful. As soon as he lifted his sleeves from her shoulder, he had a glass of wine in his hand. Come, this is a reward for you. Wu Wuyan bowed her head and thanked him. The glass was white as jade, but the wine was like the juice from the peach blossoms in the month of March, exuding a kind of unspeakable sweetness and fragrance. The aroma actually caused some movement from the fetus in her belly and made her swallow her own saliva. She had no doubts about Fan Qianshi's intentions. Since this was a reward for her, she could drink it without hesitation. There was a smell of blood in the wine, but after Wu Wuyan took a sip, she was hooked and felt a desire to finish it. Even though there was some sputum on her lips, she was only interested in the wine and wanted to gulp it down. Shwa! A colorful light emerged out of nowhere and hit the glass in her palm. Payak! The wine glass shattered as it hit the ground, and the wine spilled all over the ground. Wu Wuyan looked up and yelled at Gu Shijio, Bitch, what did you do? Her eyes were bloodshot as she rushed toward Gu Shijio at full speed. Meanwhile, Fan Qianshi's facial expression suddenly changed. He did not expect Gu Shijio to intervene and had not paid much attention to her up to this point. Moreover, she was too swift that he did not have time to stop her. Nonetheless, he did not have time to deal with the culprit at this moment. His attention was on the spilled liquor, which he had spent a lot of effort to obtain. Quickly, he waved his sleeves and a light covered the wine. Fortunately for the man, he managed to salvage some of the spilled wine and put it into another wineglass. As the ground was made of some special materials, it actually absorbed part of the liquid. Fan Qianshi only managed to collect 3/4 of the original amount. On the other side of things, Gu Shijio managed to dodge Wu Yuan's attack very smoothly. She sighed and informed Wu Wen of the contents of the wine. "The wine is poisonous. You can't drink it." "What are you talking about? My master will never poison me." Gu Shijio sneered. "The wine is definitely poisonous." Although she could not see what the wine was made of, she could smell blood from the glass of wine. Furthermore, based on the way that Wu Wuyan charged at her after only taking a sip, she could tell that this behavior was not normal. She must have been affected by the wine. Chapter 2703, Loyalty, 5. Frankly, Gu Shijio was rather surprised that Fan Qianshi would try to poison his own subordinate. Therefore, she did not pay attention to it at the beginning. After all, what reason would he have to kill her? Unless perhaps this was to induce an abortion and get rid of the kid in her belly. Nonetheless, the smell of the liquid did not seem quite right to a trained physician like Gu Shijio. Wu Yuan's response was also rather odd. Quickly, she stole a glance at Fan Qianshi and saw that he was occupied by the spilled liquor. Wuyan. Finally, he opened his mouth and called for his subordinate, who was on the verge of attacking Gu Shijio. "Rest assured, the wine is fine. I have collected it for you. Come, you can have it again." He handed over the glass of wine to her again. Wuyan was surprised. She had been with Fan Qianshi for many years, so she understood his likes and dislikes. Apparently, the man valued cleanliness a lot. Even if something precious had fallen to the ground, he would not want it anymore. But now, the man had actually consumed his spiritual power to collect some wine off the ground. This was strange for him to do. She hesitated for a moment, and Fan Qianshi's facial expression turned serious all of a sudden. "What's wrong? Are you afraid that this wine is poisonous?" Wu Wen stammered, "No, I am not." Fan Qianshi laughed and gently continued, "If this wine is really poisonous, do you plan to turn down this reward?" His voice may have sounded gentle, but the message was ice cold. Wu Wen did not dare to say anything else. She picked up the glass of wine from his hand and said, "Master, you have overthought. I have never doubted you." Fan Qianshi faintly replied, "What if I really want to kill you?" The more he spoke, the more Wu Wen felt silly for thinking that the wine was poisonous. If the king wants his minister to die, the minister has to die. If you really want to kill me, I am willing to die for you. She closed her eyes and raised the glass to her lips. At this moment, Fan Qianshi was prepared for anything that Gu Shijio could do to stop him. In fact, he had silently set up a wizardry barrier in front of Wu Wen. Therefore, if Gu Shijio were going to take another shot at the glass, she must break through this barrier first. Whatever it was, she was not going to get the same opportunity as she did before. Believing that he had sufficiently convinced Wu Wen, he knew that nothing could stop him anymore. There was a muffled sound outside the ship, which sounded as if it had collided with a rock. A slight tremor was felt on the ship from the impact. Gu Shijio and Fan Qianshi were able to keep their balance, but Wu Wen lost her balance, and the glass in her hand flew out in the motion of a parabola. The glass of wine was shattered on the ground again, and its contents covered the floor again. Wu Wen was frightened and immediately kneeled. "Master, I did not do it intentionally." Fan Qianshi was speechless. The blue veins on his forehead popped out of his head at once. He raised his hand and was going to do something, but Gu Shijio was quicker than him. She waved her sleeves and covered the wine in flames. By the time Fan Qianshi was able to block the fire, the liquor on the ground had almost completely dried up. Fan Qianshi suddenly raised his head and stared at Gu Shijio. The aura that he had been concealing had suddenly surrounded his body. A number of objects in the cabin shattered under the immense pressure exuded from his body, and his palms were blazing with a light that was ready to destroy anything in his path. Wu Yan opened her eyes widely. She recognized this move from the man. He would only use this move when he was extremely angry. If he used this attack, she was sure that Gu Shijio would disintegrate into dust along with the entire warship. If it were just a glass of wine, this reaction certainly seemed excessive. Was there really something in the wine? Just as the realization hit her, she felt some heat radiating in her stomach. She also noticed that her belly seemed to swell. Her pretty face turned ashen very quickly. Fan Qianshi noticed this and thought that the wine must be starting to take effect. He slowly retracted his palm and waved his sleeves to the front of the spaceship instead. In an instant, the wall had turned into a window so that he could see the outside of the ship. He wanted to see what had hit his ship earlier. The man had set up an autonomous driving feature that could automatically avoid any obstacles. Therefore, it was extremely strange for his ship to have collided with a rock in space. Having looked outside, he saw no reason why the ship would have to collide with any objects. He involuntarily frowned and wondered if the mechanism in his ship was failing him. Although it was rather odd, he did not have time to deal with it now, so he cast a spell to clear the path of the warship in order to prevent any other accidents. While doing so, he saw Guan Yenning's battleship in the distance. Why was this guy chasing after him? Did he come here to die? If so, he would fulfill his wish. He waved his sleeves again, and Gu Shijio saw that the controls emerged out of nowhere. Apparently, they were already in the control room, but the facilities inside were hidden away by Fan Qianshi's mysterious abilities. Gu Shijio had also caught sight of the battleship and recognized that Guan Yenning owned it. She frowned a little as she did not expect him to chase after them. Was the general unhappy that his marshal had left him? Chapter 2704. Abandoned in Guan Yenning's ship, the general's eyes were wide open. He looked at Fuyi in awe. The man next to him was able to move such a large meteorite here in space to block the marshal's path. The general had maneuvered his battleship to catch up with Fan Qianshi and finally caught a glimpse of it. He was about to establish a radio connection with the man's ship but did not expect Fuyi to stop him. Right after that, this god waved his sleeve from inside the cabin, and the giant meteor that was the size of a hill blocked the path of his marshal's battleship. It all happened so quickly that there was no time for the autopilot features in the ship to avoid the large space rock. Guan Yenning was now somewhat familiar with telekinesis after seeing it somewhat regularly over the past few months. However, he had never seen it done so effortlessly. Although Fuyi's abilities marveled him, what came next made the man's jaw drop. The remote cannons on the marshal's battleship emerged and were aimed at Guan Yenning's ship. Frantically, he screamed, "That's the soul-chasing cannon. Gone! We are gone." This cannon was the most potent weapon in the main ship. Once it was issued, it would automatically lock and track its target. Even if the ship that it was aiming at could travel 800 miles away, it would still go after it and destroy it. The power of this cannon could turn the entire warship and the people inside it into dust. They usually use this kind of cannon to deal with the enemy, but now, the marshal was actually using it to deal with him. Since Guan Yenning did not actually fire at the marshal's ship, he was in a hurry to contact the other party and explain the situation to them. However, the other party did not give him a chance to even breathe. The muzzle was now glowing with a blue light. Guan Yenning quietly closed his eyes and just waited for his doom. However, after a moment, he opened his eyes and found himself still standing in front of the console. Meanwhile, Fuyi was missing. Oddly, little Hao was also with him. Hao was currently sitting on Lu was back while pressing the buttons on the console of the ship. He maneuvered the warship into the meteorite array and stopped right in front of a cloud-shaped meteor. Guan Yenning was speechless. Could anyone tell him what was happening at this very moment? How did the cannon not hit them? Also, where did this little guy learn how to operate this ship? The general was once branded as the smartest student of his year. Even then, it took him a month to learn how to operate this battleship. The little kid was playing with the console as though it was a toy. Where did this little guy come from? Guan Yening genuinely wanted to know. Are you shocked? Di Hao finally had a chance to look at him sympathetically. Guan Yening opened his mouth, but as countless questions were running through his mind, he did not know which one to ask first. Fortunately, Di Hao made his choice for him. I know that many questions are circling your mind, but if you don't ask me anything, then you can live a little longer. With that message, Guan Yening sealed his mouth tightly and just looked into the distance. From where his battleship was located, the marshal's ship was the size of a matchbox. The ship seemed to be stationary as if trying to find its target. However, there were rays of light that emerged from the ship every now and then. Based on Guan Yening's knowledge of the features of the ship, he suspected that the lights that were issued from the ship were used as a way to explore the path ahead of them. From what he knew, there was no way that they could hide from his ship for long. Just seconds after that thought, those rays of light seemed to shine in their direction. However, it did not seem to detect them. Chapter 2705. Abandoned 2. Guan Yening held his breath and quickly looked at the locator on the console of his ship. It was bizarre that the marshal's ship did not seem to spot them. No need to check it anymore. The locator has been destroyed, and my father has set up a wizardry barrier outside the battleship. The other party can't locate us. Di Hao kindly explained the situation to him. Guan Yening breathed a sigh of relief and could finally pay attention to the main ship without freaking out. After putting things into perspective, he felt a sense of disappointment from what he had seen. I didn't expect him to really want to kill me. In the past, the two of them were close like the brothers, but now he wanted to kill him because of a small matter. The general just could not believe it. Perhaps he is not your marshal. Someone else may have occupied his body. Didn't you say that he had changed a lot over the past 2 months? Guan Yening choked on his saliva as he did have had this suspicion. However, the people from the Blue Fox planet had a unique body that prevented others from possessing it. Moreover, Duan Mayan had a profound spiritual strength. Someone weaker could have their bodies possessed, but not the marshal. It was simply unfathomable. With that last thought in mind, Guan Yening was adamant about checking on his dear brother to see if he was possessed by someone else. Meanwhile, Di Hao was focused on the spaceship in front of him. Guan Yening stared at him but did not know what was going on. He seemed to be looking at a little kid, but he felt as though he was looking at a leader that sat in a very high position. In fact, his body was carrying a faint aura around it. What are we going to do here? Guan Yening could not help but ask. Wait. Di Hao spat out a word. What were they waiting for? Guan Yening did not dare to ask another question, and Di Hao was not interested in entertaining him anyway. Inside the main ship, Fan Qianshi squinted his eyes to check his surroundings. He was excellent at using the cannon on his spaceship, so he believed that he had hit his target. Right after taking his shot, Guan Yening's battleship had immediately disappeared. The ship might have disintegrated into ashes. Fan Qianshi looked at his locator again and could not locate the other ship. However, he had a tingling feeling that things were not so simple. It seemed too easy. He thought that he would at least have to fire a few shots or watch the target fly around before eventually being destroyed. He switched on the infrared search feature and checked his surrounding area within a few hundred miles. There was still nothing that popped up on his radar. Did he really take Guan Yening out? He did not even have time to ask the man for an update on the situation down below. This made him slightly regret his impulsive action. Behind him, Wu Wen had been sweating profusely and sat down on a chair. Her belly was expanding like a balloon. The sudden expansion definitely caused her some pain. Moreover, the heat that she felt in her belly made it seem as though there was a dragon living in her stomach. The pain was excruciating. Gu Shijio frowned at the side while watching everything unfold. At first, she thought that Wu Wen was going to lose the baby. However, right now, she was not so sure. It seemed as though the child was being forced to exit her womb. What was in the wine that she drank? Gu Shijio grasped Wu Wen's wrist and checked her pulse. It seemed completely out of control. Furthermore, there seemed to be some kind of suction on her skin. When Gu Zijia's finger touched her hand, it felt as though something was sucking on it. Chapter 2706. Abandon. 3. Fortunately, Gu Zijia's reaction was quick. She loosened her grip swiftly and managed to free her hand. Even so, her index finger was burning hot. When she looked at her finger, there seemed to be a cloud-black gas hovering over it. The cloud then formed into the shape of a skull that seemed to be laughing at her. Gu Shijio had goosebumps from looking at it. She immediately cast a spell with her spiritual power to dissipate the black gas on her finger. Within seconds, her finger returned to normal. This was her first time experiencing such a strange phenomenon. She frowned and did not dare to make any rash decisions. Pong! Wu Wian struggled in pain and eventually fell to the ground. Her face had turned pale due to the pain from the accelerated growth of her belly. She had the thought of removing her soul from Lan Weihe's body but resisted the urge to do so. If her soul were to leave the body, it was likely that the child would die. Despite Wu Wian twisting and turning in pain all over the ground, her master did not even turn back to look at her. This struck Wu Wian hard. What was in it? She asked softly. It was a potion to accelerate the growth of your baby. Fan Qianshi finally looked at her. His voice was icily calm. Wu Wian's hand trembled as she caressed her belly. She had not delivered a baby before, so she did not know if the pain she was experiencing was normal. Nonetheless, she was willing to bear the pain as long as she could see the baby alive and healthy. Something is not right. Gu Shijio snorted as her eyes watched Wu Wian's belly. There was a colorful fog around her belly that had exuded a rather gloomy and chilly feeling. That was an evil aura. It was similar to the cloud of haze that Gu Shijio saw hovering above her finger, only that it was thicker and more abundant. How could Lan Weihe's baby come with an evil aura? What was inside Lan Weihe's belly? Wu Wian was so miserable, so she did not even see the colorful light. She subconsciously asked, What is wrong? You do not have a baby in your stomach. Gu Zijius pinched her fingers together and shot a ray of light toward Wu Wian's belly. However, it was blocked by some colorful magic and bounced back at her. Fortunately, Gu Shijio was able to dodge it in time. The ray of light hit a table and it disintegrated in an instant. Was this thing so powerful? Gu Shijio subconsciously knew that a great danger was before her. She did not hold back and took the opportunity to fire a few rays of light at Wu Wian's belly. However, no matter what spell she cast, the end result was the same. More and more pieces of furniture ended up getting destroyed. The repeated attacks did no damage whatsoever to Wu Wian's belly, but Gu Shijio could see that the colorful evil gas was becoming more and more potent. It also seemed to be converging into the face of a baby. Although the baby seemed to be smiling, one glance was enough to confirm that it had an evil grin on its face. Wu Wian finally noticed the wicked child's face. The child was smiling at her. When their eyes met, the child even licked his lips. Wu Wian could see that there were needle-like teeth inside the mouth of the child. It was certainly a scary sight coming from a baby. What was this monster that she had been carrying? Without delaying any further, she closed her eyes and started to execute the soul separation process. She had always been very good at using this skill and could easily pull her soul out from any body. However, for the very first time, she failed to do so. No matter what she did, she could not break free. It seemed that her soul was trapped inside this body. Chapter 2707. Abandon. 4. Despite the excruciating pain of feeling that her stomach was going to burst at any time, Wu Wian could not separate her soul from Lan Weihe's body. Her constant struggles had drenched her entire body in sweat, which made her feel very uncomfortable. Since there was a demon inside her, she decided to stretch out her hands to her belly. Her fingers were comparable to the sharpest knives in the world, and now she wanted to use them to cut her abdomen and take out this monster. To her surprise, the colorful evil gas did not stop her hand. But when her hand was about to reach her growing belly, a green light seemed to blast it. Wu Wian screamed in shock. Her fingers were broken. However, her heart hurt even more. Her angry eyes looked to the culprit who fired the green light at her. She looked at him unbelievably and asked, Do you want to kill me? Fan Qianshi looked at her fingers that were twisted and her physical appearance that looked like she had drowned in water. His pupils shrunk for a while, but he still calmly replied, "When, to sacrifice you is my last resort. You don't have to struggle anymore. Accept this reality." Wu Wuyan was speechless. This attack was obviously fatal to her. She was so loyal to him like a dog, but now he abandoned her so easily. "You finally don't want me?" She straightened herself up and continued, "You said that you would always take me with you and never abandon me." She felt very hurt and confused by his actions. Fan Qianshi heaved a sigh of relief. This is not abandonment. This is the last resort. If you drank all the wine just now, it would make your death quick and less painful. However, you spilled it. Then kill me now." Wu Wuyan screamed hysterically at him. It was really hurting her, and since she was going to die sooner or later, it was better for her to find relief sooner than later. Fan Qianshi looked away. This is what you have to bear." She could not die before the monster in her belly was born. If she entirely consumed the wine he refined, the evil aura in the wine would have accelerated the process even faster. However, because she did not drink it all, the monster took more time to be formed. Wu Wuyan's fingers were tugging the corners of Fan Qianshi's robes, but after hearing what he had said, she slowly loosened her grip. "You are so cruel. You don't even want to reduce my pain." She was desperate to die at this point, but Fan Qianshi was no longer looking at her. In a last attempt to pacify the situation, he turned to face her and said, "You will only suffer for a while, just for a while." Wu Wuyan laughed but said nothing. In fact, she did not scream again. The pain had forced her to roll silently on the ground, but she was not going to ask for his help anymore. Read the next chapter on our VIP novel. Calm Gu Shijio did not find any joy in her misery. She wanted to give Wu Wuyan the relief she sought, but she was helpless. The wizardry barrier that Fan Qianshi had set up was too great, she could not break it. Time seemed to pass very slowly. However, it was clear that Fan Qianshi that diverted his attention away from Wu Wuyan and was focused on maneuvering his ship. Nonetheless, there was something wrong with the warship. It was as if something had caught it and prevented it from moving forward. This realization infuriated the man. He kept toying with the joystick on the control panel, but nothing seemed to work. In seconds, he seemed to have snapped the joystick. "Damn!" He cursed and looked back at Wu Wuyan. Wu Wuyan stood up with her huge stomach. Her hands and feet began to twitch. The evil child's face on her stomach began to grow nearer to her face slowly. Its teeth were also more prominent. Fan Qianshi was relieved by this sight. He understood that once this child's face covered Wu Wuyan's face, he would suck her soul from her mouth and then swallow it. After that, her misery would come to an abrupt end. The child fetus would be formed, and he would become his most potent assistant to complete his mission. Boom! A loud noise was heard, as a hole emerged on the ship. The material used to make the ship was harder than diamond, so it must have been a mighty force. A purple figure suddenly appeared in the cabin. He waved his sleeves, and a colorful light that was similar to an upside-down rainbow was fired toward Wu Wuyan. Everything happened too quickly, so Fan Qianshi did not have time to assess the situation. By the time he was ready to respond, it was already too late. The majestic colorful light had covered Wu Wuyan entirely. There was a sharp and shrilling scream in the air for a second, which could numb anyone's ears. Fortunately, it was only a second before the colorful light suddenly twisted around her to end the sharp cry. When the colorful light disappeared, Wu Wuyan and the child fetus also disappeared. Fan Qianshi's plan had failed. His face turned pale instantly, and he suddenly rushed to Gu Shijio. Apparently, he wanted to catch her to be his hostage. However, he only caught air because Gu Shijio had teleported away. No one needed to guess where she ended up next, which was right beside the man in purple. In fact, she almost plunged into his arms. Fuyi! The man's familiar fragrance lingered around her nose, almost reducing her to tears. Meanwhile, the man hugged her with one of his arms and used his other hand to fire an attack at Fan Qianshi. "You can go to hell." Chapter 2708. A family of 3. The colorful ray surged and flashed as it dynamited toward Fan Chencher like a thunderbolt. Within seconds, it enveloped the man's body entirely. However, instead of shrieks of pain, Fan Chencher merely laughed. Later, a bright blue light seemed to enter the spaceship and took the man with it. He instantly disappeared from the damaged ship. In an unlikely turn of events, Fan Chencher fled the scene. He did not even have a conversation with Fuyi before leaving. Initially, Gu Shijiao expected a fierce battle between Fuyi and the man. Perhaps, it would be the most intense fight she had ever seen. It was an event that Gu Shijiao personally looked forward to as well, since she had intentions to slice the man into bits. Based on his skills and abilities, he should be able to deal with the two of them. It would not be an unfair fight for him. So, why did he run away so quickly? While still deep in her contemplations, Gu Shijiao did not realize that she and Fuyi were no longer in the spaceship. Fortunately, the two of them left the ship in time, as it seemed to have activated a self-destruct mode, which resulted in a giant firework being set off in space. It was actually a magnificent view. Fuyi's hand was carrying her in his arm, and she subconsciously grabbed his sleeve like old times. Blessed with the abilities of a god, they did not need to breathe, so it was okay for them to float around in space. The cold was bearable too. Should we chase after him? Gu Shijiao hurriedly asked. No. Fuyi shook his head slightly. We can't catch him. Gu Shijiao looked around to see if she could find any trace of the direction in which the man traveled, but could not find anything. It seemed that this guy could travel faster than a battleship. This oddity begged Gu Shijiao to ponder why he used the ship in the first place. For the sake of the child fetus. The quality of the clone body was too low to keep it alive in space. Fuyi answered her question in her head and then briefly told her about the child fetus. A cold sweat broke out over Gu Zijia's forehead. She was pleasantly surprised that the body that Wu Huayan's soul had occupied was only a clone. However, it was frightening to learn that her belly seemed to house a monster that could destroy the world. No wonder it looked so strange. The inhabitants of the world were genuinely fortunate that Fuyi arrived on time. Otherwise, that evil child would have been born. Perhaps, the primary victim in all of this was Wu Win. Thinking of her spurred Gu Shijiao to tug on Fuyi's sleeves again. Did you destroy Wu Huayan's soul earlier? Fuyi looked at her little hand that was holding his sleeve and shook his head slightly. I only intended to destroy the child fetus. Was it Wu Huayan's soul that was inside the clone body? He could still remember that woman. Gu Shijiao nodded. Yes, it was her. While she answered, Gu Shijiao had already cast a spell to gather the pieces of her soul. Fuyi's eyes flashed slightly, but he did not intervene. He chose to watch her. After a moment, Gu Shijiao stopped and frowned. Her soul has disappeared. Would it have dissipated faster since we are in space? Or was she brought away by Fan Chencher again? To satisfy their curiosity, Fuyi also cast a spell in an attempt to collect the pieces of her soul. You don't have to search for her soul anymore. It is with Fan Chencher. Gu Shijiao was furious just by the thought of that. That bastard! I will not let him go. Fuyi hugged her in his arms and calmly said, His name is Fan Chencher? Who is he? He is. Chapter 2709. A Family of 3, 2. Just when Gu Shijiao was about to tell Fuyi of his origin, the firmament stone on her wrist quickly sent her directed audio message. Master, you cannot tell him. Gu Shijiao was startled by the firmament stone, but she also understood the consequences that could lie ahead if she were to spill another secret. Swiftly, she thought of something else to say and replied, He is a bastard who is more powerful than a great deity. Fuyi stared at the firmament stone, for he could tell that something was not right. In fear of being bullied by Fuyi, it stayed idle. Did the heavenly law somehow protect Fan Qianxi's identity? Why would the firmament stone stop Gu Shijiao from telling him about their common enemy? After all, Fuyi had been the lord for 1,000 years. No one knew better than him about the consequences of breaking a heavenly law. Once a secret is spilled, disaster was bound to strike. But at the same time, what could be more powerful than a great deity? Was the man the master of heavenly laws? It seemed impossible. Shen Juli used to tell him about the master of the heavenly law. It was said that this person lived outside the 6 realms. He was in charge of the rise and fall of the world and would formulate the rules in the world to ensure its continued existence. He was strict but fair and did not allow for any biases. He was not even allowed to experience lust. How could such a god use evil tricks like the mother and child venom to harm people? But at the same time, the manner in which Fan Qianshi fled clearly showed that he was extraordinarily skillful. If Di Fuyi fought with him alone, he might not even be considered his opponent. Everything happened so quickly that Di Fuyi did not even have enough time to observe his appearance. The man was so mysterious that Di Fuyi could not even guess his intentions. Nonetheless, as long as Gu Shijio returned to his side safely, everything else did not matter. He would do whatever he could when the time came. Watching Di Fuyi contemplate the possible identity of the man had Gu Shijio feeling rather miserable since she could not tell him the truth. However, his warm embrace helped her feel more at ease, even though she simply could not believe that he found her. His timing was impeccable. I thought you would only be back after. I didn't expect you to come so soon. Did I come back too early? Di Fuyi tried to lighten the mood. Of course not. I wished you could have come back sooner. Gu Shijio quickly turned things around. Did you miss me? Of course I did. However, it is useless to miss you. Gu Zijia's tone after her last remark was a little bit sad. She was too busy these days and deliberately did not want to think about him. The thought of missing was too hurtful, and she was trying to dispose of it. How could it be useless? If you had spent more time thinking about me, maybe I could have come back to you earlier. Di Fuyi raised his hand and picked up her chin. He then gently kissed her on her lips. I wondered if you had forgotten about me again. Gu Shijio was speechless. What theory was that? She looked up at him and asked for a sincere explanation. Di Fuyi looked at her bright eyes and smiled lazily. I will tell you later. There is a more important thing to do now. What is that? Gu Shijio did not quite finish her question as Di Fuyi covered her mouth. He hugged her tightly and moved his body closer to hers. In the next second, he was kissing her with his warm lips all over her body. His movements were intense, perhaps even overbearing at times, like a man with a deep thirst. He was like a storm that swept through her whole body. Just from his actions alone, Gu Shijio knew that she no longer needed to ask her question from before. She closed her eyes to enhance her skin's receptors and tried to feel every warm kiss he gave her. She definitely enjoyed it. These days she had been missing him like crazy. Guan Yening stood in front of the console and tried to look away. He was stunned by what had happened right in front of his eyes. Chapter 2710. A family of 3. Guan Yening was familiar with the sturdiness of the marshal's warship. In fact, he knew that better than anyone else. He used to think that nothing was strong enough to destroy it. According to Duan Mayan, it was a gift from the heaven and the earth and contained the power of the sun and the moon. He never expected to see the warship disintegrated so easily and quickly. In fact, he just could not believe it to the point where his mouth was left ajar. Little Di Hao was still next to him. The kid smiled and cheered, "Success!" Ah! Guan Yening looked back at the place where he last saw Duan Mayan's spaceship and widened his eyes but could not see anything. Are you saying that your father was successful? Why don't I see him? If you can see them, then perhaps there is something wrong. Di Hao chuckled. His father had set up a wizardry barrier that could conceal his actions. Even though Di Hao was familiar with this type of barrier, he could only see the shadows of his parents flashing around and nothing else. Poor Guan Yening was confused, and no one was there to explain what was happening to him. After pondering about the situation a little longer, he asked, "What about Duan Mayan?" Although he was mad, he still cared about his buddy. After all, they had been fighting together for so many years. Duan Mayan died more than 2 months ago. Di Hao's tone was firm. You don't have to think about him anymore. My sincere condolences to you. Guan Yening was stunned. I heard that if one's body is possessed, their original soul will not die but will be squeezed into a corner of their body. Since such a powerful person possessed him, do you think he will still have a space for his soul inside his body? The fact that this marshal had all of Duan Mayan's memories proves that his soul had been swallowed up by him. There is no chance for him to be still alive. What about his body? Guan Yening could not help but inquire. His body was there in the battleship. However, if I am not mistaken, it should have disintegrated along with the battleship. Guan Yening could not believe it. Little guy, you were not there. How can you be sure? Infuriated, Di Hao chose to ignore him. Meanwhile, the general looked into the distance and felt a sense of sorrow creeping in on him. His marshal was dead, and the two lords had returned. Did they still have to stay on this continent? He knew that he needed to return to the Starry Crescent land and get his people out. Otherwise, the whole army would be annihilated. Do you regret coming here? Di Hao's question caused a stir in his stomach. The little kid could accurately guess his thoughts. Guan Yening looked at the console in front of him and wondered when he could turn back. He could not see either of the lords, so he was not even sure if he needed to wait for them. If he turned the ship around, would he face the same fate as the marshal? The lord would not do that, right? After all, this little guy was still on board. Even a fierce tiger would not kill its son. Perhaps he could take this little guy away as a hostage. When he returned to the Starry Crescent land, he would negotiate terms with the two lords to spare his life and his people. Guan Yening no longer had the intention to rule the continent. He just wanted to bring his people home. Needless to say, that would be a challenging task given his circumstances. After all, they had done a lot of bad things to rule this continent. They took out all people in the Starry Crescent land. Revenge was all but a certainty. The thought made the vein on Guan Yening's forehead twitch rigorously. He glanced at Di Hao, who was at his side, and tried to assess his chances. This little guy was so tender and small that he could probably hurt him with one finger. Chapter 27:11. A family of 3-4. Are you planning to take me as your hostage? Do you plan to use me as leverage to negotiate with my father so that he would let you and your people go? Di Hao's big eyes sparkled at him. Guan Yening was rendered speechless. This little kid could see right through him. Swiftly, he moved his hand to reach for the weapon at his waist, but it was missing. The gun that he had hidden there had disappeared. Looking for this? A silver gun was spinning in Di Hao's little hand. How could this be? Guan Yening was truly dumbstruck by the turn of events. He was already considered one of the most skilled people from his clan, yet he did not even notice when the little kid had stolen his gun. Di Hao sighed. If I were you, I would not act rashly. Otherwise, you would wish for death. Next, Di Hao handed the gun to Lu Wu, who chewed it in its mouth. Although the general was brave, he did not want to act rashly in a disadvantageous situation. He was not confident of defeating the little guy in front of him, along with the weird beast that he rode. After taking a deep breath, he decided to deny the child's foresight with a thick face. Kid, you have overthought. Anyway, should we go over and get the lord? No. Di Hao supported his chin with his fist. We will wait here. They will come back soon. Although he was fairly certain that his father would return, he could not believe that the man had left him behind twice in quick succession. Fortunately, it did not take long for Fuyi to return this time. After Di Hao waited patiently for about 15 minutes, Fuyi finally teleported back into the ship with his mother. Excited by his mother's return, Di Hao flew at her like a small and tender cannonball. Mother! He missed her dearly. These days, he had been very worried about her. He was afraid that Fan Qianshi would have already captured her by the time he and Fuyi arrived back on Earth. Gu Zijia's eyes brightened at the sight of Di Hao charging toward her. Fuyi had told her that there was a small surprise waiting for her and asked her to teleport them back quickly. Even though he had given her a clear hint, she had not expected to see little Di Hao here on the ship. Seeing him flying toward her, she raised her hand to catch him. However, she did not foresee that Fuyi would grab him by his vest and lift him toward her. Stupid! Your mother is pregnant. Why are you acting so rashly? Di Hao rolled his eyes. He was not going to hurt her, obviously. Although he appeared to be rushing over, he knew how to hold back his strength. He immediately looked up at Gu Shijio and spoke, "Mother?" Gu Shijio looked at his pitiful face, and her heart melted. She carried him into her arms and hugged him tightly. "Di Hao, you are gaining weight and growing taller." When she left the Shuro world, this kid was only a year old. Even though it had not been a long time, he looked as though he was at least 2 years old now. Distracted by the little boy, she had not realized the other being in the room. Suddenly, something was pulling at the end of her clothes. She looked down and saw that Lu Wu was pulling her clothes with its mouth and trying to get her attention. Gu Shijio was overjoyed. It was such a rush as she did not expect to see the two of them and Di Fuyi. She raised her hand and patted its fur. "It's good to see you again. Where is the muscle?" "The muscle was sent back to Tianju Hall. I'm sure it is waiting for you to go back now." Di Fuyi informed her as he raised his hand and wrapped it around her waist. Gu Shijio suddenly felt eager to return to the starry crescent land. "What are we waiting for? Let's go back." She swept her eyes across the cabin and saw Guan Yening standing nearby. It would seem that some of her happiness had diminished as she did not quite like Guan Yening. After all, this fellow was also one of the culprits behind this mess. Her glare was enough to scare the general to the point where his scalp went numb. He stood there and smiled to try to reduce the tension in the room. "My lords, are we going back now? Why is he here?" Gu Shijio did not buy it. Di Fuyi answered, "I needed him for a temporary assignment. Fortunately, he was able to drive this ship so that we could catch up to you. Otherwise, he would not have arrived in time to stop Fan Qianshi." That was certainly a significant contribution, for they could not even imagine the consequences that would befall the world if Di Fuyi had arrived slightly later. Chapter 27:12. Di Fuyi's requirement. Gu Shijio stopped hinting why she did not want the man to be on the ship. Meanwhile, Guan Yening sighed as he understood the situation surrounding his comrade. He still insisted in finding out the marshal's whereabouts. Di Fuyi could very easily tell that Fan Qianshi had possessed Duan Mayan's mortal body. However, it was safe to assume that Duan Mayan himself was already dead. "He is gone." Guan Yening's face turned pale at once. "Who did this to him? Where did the person go? I shall do whatever I can to avenge his death," he said determinedly. Di Fuyi threw him a quick glance and answered sarcastically, "You are not even capable of getting close to him. Don't make a promise that you cannot keep." Even then, Guan Yening was not ready to give up without trying. Before he said anything more, Di Fuyi added, "However, you do have a way to help us get revenge. Tell me everything about where you have been in recent years. Also, I need to know how your general has been acting lately." He who had a thorough knowledge of the enemy was bound to win in a battle. Di Fuyi surely needed to find out more about the enemy, especially since Fan Qianshi had been manipulating the situation in the dark. There must be reasons behind the invasion from the people of Blue Fox Planet. Perhaps, Fan Qianshi might have stirred up the idea and edged them on for the galactic invasion. It was likely that he could find out more about Fan Qianshi's intentions from the invaders of the Starry Crescent Land. Guan Yening agreed to share what he knew. "I can tell you everything that you want to know in exchange for the safety of my men. I want them to leave in peace." Scornfully, Gu Shijio refused to take the offer. "You have almost driven the entire Starry Crescent Land into extinction with so many innocent lives lost in the bloody hands of your men. How dare you offer us the information in exchange for the safety of these murderers? Do you think this feud is going to end the easy way?" Guan Yening stubbornly replied, "If you are not going to let them go, I will not tell you a thing." Gu Shijio gently tapped the table with her fingers while threatening him. "Actually, we can easily find someone else for information. There are so many people from the Blue Fox Planet down there. If I threaten them enough, I will surely get what I need." Guan Yening felt immediately threatened by the Lord. What they know may not be as much as what I do. After all, I am the one who has spent the longest time with the Marshal, so I know more than anyone else. I can save you from going down a winding road. Gu Shijio laughed out loud. Are you trying to say that you are the only person we can rely on? Guan Yening confidently replied, yes, they do not know quite as much as I do. Tell me everything, and I shall allow you to have your ship and leave in peace. Your life will be spared. No! Guan Yening exclaimed. I will either leave with my men or not at all. He quickly refused the offer without any hesitation. Gu Shijio stood up and said, there is no point in this discussion anymore. She clenched her fists while looking around the cabin. I do not think your presence will do any good here. I shall end your life here so you and your marshal can die in the exact same place. She looked like she was going to blow up the entire ship. Panicked, Guan Yening immediately added, we are now moving through space. Both of you are supreme beings, so you can still live devoid of air. However, the little boy may not be able to survive. Once the ship is broken, he will surely get hurt. His remark caught Fuyu's attention. We can try and see, he smilingly said. He curled his fingers and started reciting a spell to draw his spiritual power to his palm. A streak of 7 colored rays could be seen increasing in brightness in his hand. Ashen, Guan Yening was well aware of the power of Fuyu's kung fu. With a simple gesture at his fingertip, he was able to move an entire meteorite in space. That simply showed how easy it was for him to destroy the ship. Guan Yening heaved a deep sigh and finally gave up. Swiftly, he kneeled on the floor and said, My lords, I know my mistake. Please give me a chance. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.